Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Of Vegas here in Spaced Out Radio Land. It's a short week for us as we prepare to head to Nevada and meet with all of you. Hello, my name is Dave Scott. Check out the new sign on air. Look at that. Got this weekend. Happy about that. Very happy. When you see that sign on, it means we're actually on air. Let's try that. On air. I love it. Love it. Graeme Rendle is our guest tonight. We are about to get schooled tonight in UFO history. Schooled, people, and we are all going to be better off for it. And I'm so excited to have Graeme on. We'll bring him on momentarily. But first, let's say hello to everyone in our chat room tonight on air. Nightmare in the gold medal position. We have Race Fan taking home the silver and B with the bronze medal tonight. Downshift, Globe Asunder, the gorgeous Cosmic Floor, Downshift. How are you all? Thank you for coming on in. Cloudy with a chance of UFOs. Nice to see you. Black Dragon is here. Our favorite veterans. We love our veterans around here. That's our favorite Marine, Black Dragon. Awesome, Ann Palmer is here. She'll be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio if you don't mind. To the left of the studio. Eris Mana, how are you? Thanks for coming on in. As we continue on with roll call, Grand Paul Holland in Australia. Dirty Fylth, 2 days, buddy. We are 2 days away. Eddie Haskell, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Who else is here tonight? Well, let's take a little bit of a peek here. Wes H., Kevin, nice to have you both here. The gorgeous Aunt Edna has returned. She prefers aunt over aunt. The Luscious Jewels, thank you for coming on in. Roy the Boy, good to have you here, my man. And who else is joining us? We have, let's see here, Dutch Hank. How are you, Dutch Hank? He'll be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, to the right. Carbine's right, nice to see you. Mr. Lurks a lot, thanks for coming on in. John Swan, good to see you. And Bigfoot Michigan Rob, stunning Samantha Hazelwood Gray, the lovely Laura has returned. And who else is joining us here? The stunning Cindy has returned as well. She had a safe long weekend, a safe one. All right, moving on here. Good morning to you, Natalie, in the UK. The lovely Nicole Perron, good Canadian kid. Millennium, Richard Elmore, good to see you guys. Thanks for coming on in. And who else do we have here? Vash the Impaler. Enzo, what's happening? Benji, what's happening, man? Zen1, thanks for coming on in. Ms. Gorgeous Fidgety Aura has returned after a hiatus last week. EMF, you're unbelievable. Oh, there we go. All right, Noble Patrick, good to see you. Holy cow, there he is, everyone. It's Doug Shelby. The Doug Shelby has returned. Yes, there he is. Yep, he points a finger at you like this. That's what he does. Absolutely. Alien Critter, what's happening, man? Thanks for joining us. Crunch Wrap Supreme, that's a good taco right there. And welcome to SOR Chat. Penman, Brown Dwarf, the lovely Jenny, what's happening? Dragon L, how are you? Thanks for joining us. I got to start the radio side here. Hold on. It's kind of important that we start the radio side to this broadcast. Mennonite Abe, Worsley, good to have you both here. And Christoph, yeah, he's the guy who directed he's a director, Christoph. You could tell he wears a beret. Absolutely. To Joe's Maine, you've got aliens. And who else is here? We're caught up. We're caught up just like that. Super Chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. So thank you so much for everyone's support. That'll happen this week. And of course, we're only here until Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, and Monday, we will be going to and coming back from Las Vegas, Nevada. And let's see here. What else can I tell you? The store is open, so if you got gear there, make sure you fill it all in. I've noticed a lot of people aren't filling in their addresses. Kind of hard to ship you gear when you don't put your address in, so make sure you do that. Pine Island Research, how are you, buddy? Good to have you back. Terry Brown, good to see you. We are 10 seconds away from launching this week off. I'm excited. You guys should be as well. We got one hell of a show tonight, but I need a favor first, everyone. Horns up. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Odyssey Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Tonight's show brought to you by CHIVE Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting CHIVE Charities today. You can find them on our website. A fantastic show planned out for you tonight. First, Graeme Rendle has gotten up early in the United Kingdom to join us to talk about the history of UFOs before Roswell. Yes, this is going to be a good one. Then, in hour 3, we're going to head to the swamp, where Swamp Dweller brings us another spooky story. The fedora-wearing Jon Hudson has the UFO report. Shirky Poo has the news. Graeme Rendle has had an interest in aviation, World War II military history, German wartime secret weapons, and ufology since he was a youngster. And it's been going on for over 45 years, his addiction to flight in the sky. All of this came together with the publication of his brand new book about the World War II Foo Fighters, UFOs Before Roswell, which was released in 2021. He also has written for the Debrief website. Yes, he's a guy who takes after our good friend Tim McMillan. Shadows of Your Mind magazine and UAP Media UK, in addition to several books of World War II aviation interest in the county of Northumberland, Northern England, where he lives. Graeme is co-host of the Unidentified Aerial podcast, part of the Anomalous Podcast Network, with Dave Partridge of Shadows of Your Mind magazine. And for the first time, we're glad to have him here, Graeme Rendle. It is such a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, man?
Hi, Dave. Morning from the UK. It's just after 5 a.m. here, so up bright and early for you.
You are looking sprite this morning. Sprite.
This is the best you get, I'm afraid.
You know, the one thing that I find about a lot of UFO researchers that have been doing this a long time, we all have an interest in military aviation that led us kind of down this path. Do you remember going back as a kid and seeing your first maybe air show or airplane? Because I know where I grew up in Abbotsford, British Columbia, from the time I was 3 years old until in 1983, I always saw the Vulcan bomber every year. And I loved the Vulcan bomber. And between that and the old Canadian CF-101 Voodoos, from the time I was 3, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's all I wanted to do was fly jets. Were you pretty much the same way?
Yeah, you've just thrown a couple of classic kind of Cold War jet type aircraft there at me, so I know exactly the types you were talking about. I used to live about 3 miles from the end of Newcastle International Airport's runway when I was a kid, in the northern suburbs of Newcastle. So it's a city in northern England near the Scottish border. And even at an early age, before I started school, you could hear the aircraft coming, near the house, flying in. And a lot of military crew training was done back in those days. So the RAF, other air forces from NATO as well. So you would get Vulcans quite a lot, but you get things like you get Harriers, you get Lightnings, Jaguars, Buccaneers, all these classic RAF types of aircraft. But the Lightnings were a 1960s jet interceptor, and effectively they were a fuel tank with a man in it. They were just really quick, didn't have much fuel, didn't have much endurance, but they were loud and they were very fast. And they would come off the runway in Newcastle if they took off from there, and they would go straight upwards, almost like vertical to a certain altitude and then level off. But the noise that they generated when they took off, from being in school in the schoolyard, everybody just stopped and just watched them, disappear into little dots in the sky. And it was fantastic. And I was building model aircraft back then as well. So I got into research, into like early kinds of research. I mean, it wasn't really research, but it was reading the instructions and the kind of little potted histories of these aircraft that I was building when I was 4 or 5 years old. These airfix kits of Spitfires and Messerschmitts and everything else. So I got a thorough grounding in just general types of aircraft from a really early age, either seeing them or building them.
Well, I have to ask you, see, over here, we only ever got 2 British aircraft. We got the Vulcan bomber and the old Victor tanker.
Okay.
That was it. And I remember going to my school library at the time and as a kid and be like, okay, well, there's the Vulcan, there's the Victor. What else do they have? And then, you see the Tornado or you see the Buccaneer and it's like, I want to see that. Why can't that come over? As a kid, you're like, I want to see that one. But no, I mean, aviation is such a beautiful, beautiful thing, because I don't think there's a person on this planet that has looked up to the sky or looked deep into the stars and said, I wish I could fly up there. I mean, that passion that you had towards it, which really kind of inspired you to become a writer. I mean, you didn't become a pilot, I don't believe, but you became a writer and a historian regarding it. Do you feel it's just your little way to give back after a lifetime of enjoyment watching airplanes and jets in the sky?
Oh yeah, definitely. You must have been you must have quite a lot of knowledge along the way. And it's a good way of giving that back to other people who maybe don't have that expertise or that knowledge, or that just sort of quest for knowledge. There's a lot of aviation history in the county I live in England, but it's not necessarily written about too much because we weren't in the front line during World War II to that extent of what southern England was like around London and the southeast. So it was a bit of a backwater during World War II. I mean, there was things went on here, but it's not something that a lot of people have written about. So there's things like that which probably needed to be written before the people who had any link with it or had any experience of it or knowledge of it, have passed on. So there's a local airfield which is about 12 miles from where I live, and there's never been a book on that particular aerodrome. And yet I wrote one because I felt it was a gap that needed to be filled. So I've done things like that before, and that was well received. And there was a lot of people in the area, even though they knew about this airfield and they had memories of it when they were kids, or they've had other family links with it, they never knew the full story. And of course, I put that all together, and I felt if any kind of legacy that I leave, it'll be things like that which I'll be really proud of, and it's just leaving something like that for posterity.
For all the knowledge that you have gained over the years as an aviation historian, writer, researcher, where do UFOs stand in all of this?
Well, funny enough, everything came together with the UFO angle in terms of UFOs before Roswell. So you mentioned before that I've got an interest in aviation, I've got an interest in World War II, got an interest in German secret weapons from that conflict, and UFOs. So all those things, and well, in aviation, so they all came together with the Foo Fighters and the other UFOs from World War II. So that's where it all ties in. But ufology started much earlier than about when I was 8 or 9. I was reading things like Isaac Asimov books, novels, science fiction novels back then. And my mother thought she was doing me a favor one day, and she brought me a book which she thought was another one of these science fiction novels with these really nice covers of these spaceships on the front. Except it turned out to be a book about UFOs by Brinsley Power Trench, Mysterious Visitors. It was published in 1975, and it had a flying saucer on the front. And she thought, there you go, Graeme. Here's another one for you. And I started reading it, and it was fact. It wasn't fictional. It was purporting to be fact. And that, obviously, again, when you're that kind of age, and my mind used to get stimulated over things like that. It was a bit of a sponge, really. So I got one book. I was really fascinated with these tales of things that people were allegedly seeing, and I wanted to know more. So cleaned the library out with all the books they had on UFOs, and just amassed knowledge that way.
Now, you are not particularly an experiencer. You have had one UFO sighting as a child. Could you play that for us? What happened there? What did you see?
I was in the schoolyard. It was during the summer holidays, and this was somewhere I used to go and play when I was a kid. And I was probably 11, maybe 12-year-old or something. And there was this. My attention was drawn to the flight path into the runway 25 at Newcastle Airport, which is about 3 miles away. Except this wasn't an airplane. Obviously, I was well versed in the shapes of airplanes and balloons, gliders, microlights, all this kind of thing. So, and this thing didn't look like it. It was like a teardrop on its side, and it was orange and silver, and it was going against the wind as well. It was moving against the wind direction, and it was fairly low down. Probably, I can't tell you what height it was. I can't tell you what size it was because I have no frame of reference, but it just didn't look right. It was one of those things where it's got no right to be there, kind of thing. And then it disappeared behind a cloud after maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and it disappeared. And I have still no idea what that was to this day. And it wasn't something that had a huge, profound kind of effect on my life, but I was already interested in UFOs by then. And it was just one of those things where, what was that? I didn't have anybody to talk to back then about it. My family, I probably mentioned it to my family. I can't even remember what their reaction was, other than, "Oh, well, that's interesting, Graeme." It was probably something along those lines. What do you want for dinner now, sort of thing. But really, my friends weren't that interested in it. They all knew certain football or films or the war or cowboys and Indians, all this kind of stuff. So, I had nobody I could actually talk to about this. So it was just something that just sat in my brain until much later on I started talking to people who had a similar interest.
Now, for you, having that similar interest, when did you start geeking out about UFOs? When did you become one of us?
Well, in terms of engaging like full scale with other people on the subject, it was only a few years ago when I actually went part-time at work. I used to work for our National Health Service in the UK, and I went part-time about 4 days a week, so just to relieve some stress at work. And I had more free time, so I got more into social media and started reading other people's experiences and hearing other stuff. And this was actually just prior to 2017. With the release of those 3 videos, I was already sort of on the cusp of getting a bit more involved in terms of maybe sort of expressing some opinions and this kind of thing. But that appeared on the everybody's radar. So that, of course, that ignited everybody's who had any sense of interest in the UFO field. And of course, I got swept along with the tide. But it's only really been in the last sort of 12 months, 18 months, I've actually had much more time to get involved, as it were, right across my days, right across my weeks, because I've effectively taken early retirement. I took early retirement at the age of 54. So,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm a full-time writer now, so that's all I do.
Graeme, you have quickly become one of the premier voices and researchers within the topic of ufology, history, and everything. When you speak, a lot of people listen. And when people found out that we were having you on the show, I couldn't believe the amount of accolades that were coming on towards us in tweets and messages about, wow, like Graeme Rendle is going to be on Spaced Out Radio. Like, you've built up quite a star for yourself. How did that happen, man? Did you even know?
I have no idea. I don't class myself as an expert in anything. I don't class myself as any particular knowledge. It's just, information I've amassed over the years, and I've got some knowledge of how to access information from official records in the UK in terms of military and aviation records. And if that makes me, align with all these accolades that you say that people are giving me, then that's great. But I don't set myself out as being an expert by any means. And it's just, I think it's a happy accident. It was like a lot of things in my life. I seem to have stumbled into things and not trying too hard. I mean, I put a lot of work into the book, but I seem to have just like somehow got this reputation that I seem to know what I'm doing. And I suffer from imposter syndrome a lot. Believe me, I keep thinking, what am I doing here? Why are all these people so excited about what I'm saying and what I'm doing? But I guess that I tried to come up with a book that people couldn't necessarily knock down too much. In terms of the overall kind of, what are these things, then that's open for debate, like everything else in ufology. But in terms of the research, I wanted it to be something that people couldn't necessarily chip away at too much and say, look, you've got this wrong after 5 years, or somebody comes along and goes, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Graeme. I've seen other books. I used to read books like this in the 70s and 80s where there were very little footnotes. And then people used to have these kind of leaps of logic and leaps of faith in the book where I used to scratch my head even at an early age and think, how the hell have you got to there from there? So when I thought about writing a book, I didn't want to fall in that trap. I wanted everything to be documented, everything for people to do their own research or to look at what I'd footnoted and go, yeah, I want to check that source. I want to see if Graeme's used the right information and he's taken it, in the right context. So all that information is, it's all kind of quite relevant. It's all stuff that people should do anyway when they're researching everything. You check your sources, you go back to the original source of information to make sure that you can't go any further and it's not, coming from a different place, or it's not saying something different, it's not a different context, to make sure that you're actually reinforcing what you're putting forward. So I hope I've achieved that. I mean, there's over 1,100 footnotes in the book, so that says something. But unfortunately, it's still down to the reader at the end of the day to determine whether or not I'm talking sense. I won't use another word to say, I'm talking something else, as a good old English phrase begins with B. But I could be talking nonsense, let's say, but I'd like to think that, the research at least comes up with a whole lot of information and information that people haven't seen before. And that's quite important as well, rather than just regurgitating the same stuff all the time and just presenting it in a different way. There's too much of that gone on before as well.
I'm going to ask you a very vast question here.
Okay.
What do you think ufology today is missing? We've seen the excitement about Tic Tacs. We've seen the excitement about the U.S. government hopping on board with this. It hasn't been caught with that much accolades from allies like my country, Canada, or your country in the United Kingdom. It hasn't caught fire as much. We've seen experiencers really pushed and kicked to the side, saying your opinions, because they're anecdotal, really aren't necessary for the research that we are doing. What are we missing in today's ufology?
2 words, Dave: absolute proof. That's what we're missing. That's the thing that would probably unite a lot of people. But then again, some people would come along and just say, oh, that's fake news. Somebody's just made that up. So you're never going to please all the people all the time. For those who are interested, and all those different people, diverse elements that you just mentioned there's probably no one unifying thing that will get everybody together. But you'd like to think that if something did happen that is fairly incontrovertible, that they say, right, yes, people who are fairly level-headed would go, yeah, that is proof. Then that's the thing that's missing, and that's the thing that will unite everybody and get everybody behind a common purpose, a common banner. But we're nowhere near that yet. People say they have proof, and people have bits of the puzzle. But in the end, when you look at things and you go, yeah, but that's not enough to tip people over to this kind of widespread acceptance that there is something that people that we're dealing with. And even I don't know what the answer is myself. I wouldn't claim to have proof of anything really. I've got proof of, in terms of there's something happened in the past, and we're going back to the book, but that's all I can say. What that is, it's open to interpretation, but it's not necessarily what some people have claimed it to be in the past, and that's something else I go into to try and knock down explanations which don't make sense in the original context. of the Foo Fighters and other associated phenomena in World War II. And I just think, look, it can't be those things. Here's why. Now that leaves other things open for debate. But that's a similar thing today as well, that people keep like coming up with these amazing explanations like, oh, they're just drones, or they're super secret US technology. But then when you look at it in the round, you look at it in context, you can see that sometimes they're not drones, because we'll see what the Russians are using in Ukraine at the moment. They're using effectively radio-controlled airplanes with camera lenses attached to them and wrapped up in duct tape. And if that's the best they've got, why aren't they using these super secret things that are, supposedly flying around US Navy formations in a conflict that they're desperate to win? Now, are they Chinese? Well, there's another question entirely. Yes, they've got advanced drone technology, but have they got things that are doing what people are suggesting of the eastern west coast of America? Probably not. So these are explanations that people have to sort of look into and think, are they really what you're just coming up with this kind of, just, oh yeah, it's just drones, this kind of explanation, or they're just seagulls, or the gimbal video is just a commercial airliner or another F-18 at a considerable distance. You're just seeing it from tail on. Come on, have a bit more kind of, sort of savvy, have a bit more nous and think a bit more deeply about this.
Well, you know what? I always kind of turn my head when I hear the word proof, and my brain starts going because I don't know what proof is. Okay, your proof is going to be different to my proof. As an experiencer who has seen UFOs and has been face to face with aliens, I look at things as I already have my proof. Somebody of your ilk maybe does not. I mean, is it about the government? And it always seems to have to be the United States government to see the president come to the podium to say, my fellow Americans, we are not alone in the universe. I mean, is that the proof that we are talking about? Or is it a down craft? Is it what happened at Roswell and the aliens let's trot them out from Area 51 or Wright-Patterson or wherever they are? Is it Rendlesham? What is proof?
It's all those things. You can't just have one and not the other. Your proof is not my proof because I haven't experienced what you have. I haven't experienced what other people have. Now, that's a singular proof, but unfortunately, you can't reach everybody else with that proof because I haven't had the same experience. Similarly, if I'd had an experience and say somebody else in UAP Media UK, because not everybody in my group has had an experience, then it's not the same as theirs. And some of them have had experiences which I haven't had either. So not everybody's going to have the same level of proof in terms of what they've experienced or what they haven't. So you can't necessarily say, oh, well, that's a proof that works for everybody. But yes, okay, the US president coming out on a podium and saying that would go some way to do it. But there'll still be people who say, oh, no, that's just fake, or he's doing it for some political purpose or something like that. So you've got to get beyond that. It's got to be that and other things. It's got to be a general acceptance from people right around the world. Other governments have to be involved. The media have to be involved. The skeptics have to be involved as well. You name it, they've got to be involved, but they've all got to accept it from different directions because they're not all going to have your experience or people in your audience, the experiences that they no doubt have had as well.
1 minute to go. Are we ready for it?
No, we're not. In the day of fake news and things that can be CGI'd and things that are actually true, and yet people refuse to believe it. I'm not going to get into politics here, but I'm sure we all know one major thing that happened in the US recently that people still deny that happened. Things like that can be sort of, just interpreted different ways for different political and social ends. So it would affect a lot of people, and a lot of people would accept it as truth. But right across the board, 100%, you'd still get people who deny it for various reasons.
And on that note, Graeme, I'm going to get you to sit comfortably at your beautiful study in the United Kingdom, and I'll be here in Canada, the Commonwealth, reigning large tonight on Spaced Out Radio. When we return from the break with author Graeme Rendle, we are going to get into his latest book, UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 1945. The foreword by a familiar voice around here, Mr. Sean Cahill. This is going to be awesome. I am so geeked up about having Graeme talk about his new book. Right next on Spaced Out Radio. All right, we're clear.
Good.
Good stuff. Good start. Nice warm up there.
Yeah. It's always a joy to work out what kind of questions somebody's going to throw at me. It's wonderful.
Well, you know what? Hey, it's 9:30 p.m. here. I'm on my game tonight.
It's 5:30 in the morning. I've had my first cup of coffee and I feel I'm actually awake. So
done. Right on. All right. Got a bunch more people coming in here. We're at 160 now.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, indeed. That's really good.
Oh, Bigfoot Rob, that's not even funny. That is not even funny. 2 of clubs, 7 of diamonds. You're a jerk. Just for that, Rob, I'm going all in with a deuce 7 offsuit when we're sitting at the table this week, and I'm going to take your chips, and I'm going to enjoy them, and I'm going to put them in my pocket. I'm not even going to spend them. I'm going to put them in my pocket. Oh, some people's children. Believe you me. Vaughn, how you doing, buddy? Thank you so much for that super chat. Along with Dragonelle, very much appreciate, love, and support. The super chat is a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. So, yeah. We got all the Bigfoot people who are coming to Vegas. We're going to get a poker tournament going. And one of the guys who's coming, he's actually played in the World Series of Poker 3 times.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I have no knowledge of poker, I'm afraid. I'll be a pretty poor player, but that's some achievement.
Well, then you are more than welcome to come play. We'll show you how to.
I'm sure you will. Take all my money with me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't mind.
I'm sure you
We
don't.
don't mind at all.
Yeah. No.
Beelzebrad, how you doing, man? Good to see you here. And, yeah. Damn Bigfoot Rob. All right. Excuse me. All right. Oh, Nicole Sackage, I'm fading fast tonight. That's not a good start to the week, Nicole. Not a good start to the week. Amateur for Vegas. There you go. Magnus Zaram, how are you? We've got about 2 minutes here, buddy.
Okay. There's a lot of people in the chat who I've not recognized the names. So that's really nice to see a lot of people who I've never seen on other shows before. That's really good. You got a completely different, diverse audience.
They are incredible.
Yeah.
They are very smart. In hour 2, they'll be typing their questions in capital letters in there. And then what I'll do is I'll bring it up on the screen and I will read it to you.
It's good to see a lot of people who I recognize as well. That's quite nice. But yeah, it's always good to see new people, or people I'm not familiar with. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's either way works here.
Yeah.
There's David Warman from Aberdeen, Scotland. Welcome to SOR Chat.
Granite City.
Mm-hmm. Philip Blair, welcome. Enzo sums it up right here.
Yeah, hi, Laura.
And Mr. Rendall, cheers, brother. Good to see you.
Benji, yes, hi there.
Thank you, Terry Brown. All right, we got 20 seconds here.
Okay.
Mr. Catfish, how you doing? Ten seconds. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate you tuning us on in. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Graeme Rendle is here. He's got up early for us in the United Kingdom to talk some UFOs, and man, are we glad that he is here. In the last year, he wrote a book called UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters 1940 to 1945. And the foreword is written by a good friend of this show, Sean Cahill, as well. Graeme, welcome back.
Hi, Dave.
Very much glad to have you here. You being a historian, why was writing this book important to you?
It was something that needed to be written, I felt. There have been other attempts to cover the history of Foo Fighters, but the previous attempt was done in 2007 by Keith Chester. It was Strange Company, and it was a really good book. It covered both the European and the Pacific Wars, but I felt there were a few mistakes in it. And I've spoken to Keith about this in the past, and we've corresponded about it briefly, and he admitted that this was an early kind of attempt to try and cover it, and he knew it's like most books, there will be errors, and of course there'll be errors in my book as well, but I felt those needed to be put right. But also there was a lot more information I felt that could have been that needed to be told, needed to be put out there, and I just started writing. And when I started researching, I found a hell of a lot more cases as well that had never ever been published before. They'd never actually never been unearthed. So they were part of the book. And then there's some popular misconceptions about the Foo Fighters that have never really been addressed too much in print. Things about the German flying discs and these aerial flak mines that a certain Italian author came out with, which have always been put forward as these were the Foo Fighters. And I felt that needed to be looked at as well and gone through with a fine-tooth comb. So part of the book's to do with that as well. So it covers the whole thing. So it was a book that I would have loved to have read some years ago when I was getting into the subject. And I increasingly felt that if I didn't write it, then probably nobody would attempt to do it. That might sound arrogant. I hope it's not. But that's what I felt. And I thought that this needs to be written. Foo Fighters have had a pretty raw deal over the years, I feel, as well. I'm not sure if you're aware of the story behind where the information came from in terms of the early days, but it was an American Legion magazine from December 1945, and a former aide to General Hap Arnold, who was the head of the US Army Air Force during World War II. He'd been embedded with the troops in Europe over the winter of 44-45 on a fact-finding tour. It wasn't anything to do with the Foo Fighters. It was just a general, how are the men doing? What's the logistics like? What the morale like? But he'd heard these stories. He'd had access to the information that the intelligence officers were putting through. And he gleaned a few cases from that information and put them into print, with a few cases from the Pacific War as well, and a couple of daylight cases. It was all fairly kind of, there was a few details, but enough to get an article out of it. And that was where UFO authors mined that article for information for the best part of the next 50 years, with a few exceptions, a few of the cases that came out of the woodwork. Some pilots came forward. So if you were reading things like Flying Saucer Review in the UK, or Leonard Stringfield's CRIFO in the United States, and some other publications, they're quite niche, obviously, that's where you'd find this information. But until about the mid-90s, there was very little on the Foo Fighters. Some books just ignored them entirely. They started at Roswell, well, they started at Kenneth Arnold, his case, and then when Roswell became a thing after 78, then they would start with that sometimes. Whereas other books would have the mystery airships of the 1890s. They would have the ghost flyers of the 20s and 30s. And then they would skip World War II entirely and go to the ghost rockets. And I used to think at an early age, well, there must be something going on here, because they're missing out this huge amount, of history where all these people were in the skies. There were people on the ground specially trained to watch out in the skies for enemy aircraft. Why wasn't anything being reported? And that always, when I was a kid, that used to get me thinking, what's going on here? And then when I started reading more, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could see this kind of deficit of information. And I just kept wondering why. When I read Keith Chester's book, I realized there was more to it. And then that got me thinking I could, maybe see if there's anything more out there. And then when I did the research, I found all these extra cases. It just needed to be written.
For people who may not know what a Foo Fighter is, what is the
accept the term? What was the definition?
What is it?
Well, the name itself was actually coined to describe a particular phenomenon which was happening. Now, according to the established narrative, it was in November 1945 when they started seeing these things, these American night fighter crews in Europe, and they were based at a particular airfield in eastern France. It was the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. They were based at Nancy, and they were flying operations over eastern France, western Germany. But there was also another unit, the 422nd. They were based in Florence in Belgium, and they were flying like similar types of missions at night. So they were shooting up targets on the ground, or they were shooting down German aircraft on training missions and bombing missions. And they kept seeing things like these lights, and they were simply balls of light. There was nothing else to them. They couldn't discern a shape behind them. It wasn't as if it was an aircraft with a light attached to them. It was just a light. And the lights would alternatively follow the aircraft, or they'd sit off their wingtips, or sometimes both. They would transition from one position to the other. And didn't matter what the pilots of these aircraft did to try and shake these lights off, the standard evasion maneuvers, these things would just stick to them until they flew off for their own volition. So night after night, one or more crews were starting to see these things. And in November 1944, the number of these sightings was pretty much every night. And it got to the point where the intelligence officer of the 415th was actually, asking the crews and debriefing them after each mission, and they were telling him. And he asked one about, what, and it was quite dismissive at the time, because it was one of these things where, are you trying to get out of flying? Are you trying to say that you're mad, kind of thing? And that was a standard thing. And the pilots were questioned. Are you trying to get off flying duties? Have you been drinking? That was an RAF thing. But in the America, he was just getting a bit sick of all these strange stories of these ridiculous lights. And he said, I'm not necessarily believing you, sort of thing, but it was I'm paraphrasing here, but it was that type of conversation. But the radar observer, a guy called Donald Myers, who he was talking to, got this comic book out of his back pocket in his flying overalls and slammed it down on the desk of the intelligence officer's desk and went, "It's those Foo Fighters." And that's what he said, and that's what he called them. And it was based on the name of a cartoon strip in the comic, to do with this crazy firefighter who kept saying, "Where there's foo, there's fire." And that's where the name comes from. But it was balls of light that followed aircraft around. Sometimes they were seen coming up from near the ground, not necessarily the ground itself. And there were different colors. They weren't just red. They were sometimes orange, sometimes white, other colors as well. Nobody knew what they were. They weren't hostile. They didn't seem to attack. They didn't open fire. They didn't interfere with the aircraft's functioning or anything like that, as some people have claimed. But nobody knew what they were. But they certainly unnerved the crews.
And rightfully so, it would have unnerved them because, I mean, when you're flying primitive technology or the top technology at the time, which was be highly primitive to these balls of light in the sky that would zoom on past them or sometimes even stop and follow them, kind of like they're observing their next move like a highlight reel. I mean, this had to be absolutely fearsome for somebody who's, say, in a Lancaster bomber or a B-17 back in the day, flying into Germany, wondering what the heck is going on.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, the accepted sort of definition of Foo Fighters has the narrative of starting in November 45 and going on to the end of the war. But you're right, Lancaster crews, other aircraft crews, both British and American, had been seeing these things much earlier. The things that were described as Foo Fighters by the Americans, they'd actually seen them much earlier. And if you go back through the war diaries and the squadron reports and the mission reports, which I've done from the American archives, then you'll find that those sightings in Europe by those two units that I just mentioned before were actually being seen as early as September 1944. But also people forget there were two other American US Army Air Force night fighter units, the 415th and the 416th, who were based in Italy at the same time. And they were flying missions over southern France, northern Italy, that kind of area. And they were seeing strange things as well. They were getting directed to things on radar that were going far too fast to be Luftwaffe aircraft or even the Rump Italian fascist Air Force. And this was happening as early as June 44 and even earlier in some respects. So this phenomenon wasn't particularly confined to that winter of 44-45, which most books that I've ever read say it is. And if you even look further back, the RAF themselves were seeing strange things. And the first reports in terms of intelligence documents, which actually confirm this, go back to August 1942. But there are anecdotal stories, one particular, which is the cover of the book that my good friends Dan Zetterstrom and Olaf Rockner depicted for me as art. This happened in March 1942, where a Polish Wellington crew flying back from a bombing raid on Essen in Germany were over the Zuider Zee in Holland, and this amber-colored disc flew up behind them. Now, that's not something in the German repertoire. They didn't have that kind of technology. But this thing was fired upon by the gunners of the aircraft, and it just didn't do anything. The bullets went into it and, well, nothing happened. It sat off the tail. It then flew on the wingtip of the airplane, and then it flew around to the nose, and then flew off after a while. And all the time they were firing on it, and yet nothing happened. So these stories and these things that appear in the intelligence reports and the mission logs and the squadron records happened much earlier than people sort of, are kind of like aware of in terms of what you've read over the last how long in UFO books. You can set the clock much further back from when it starts. There are even hints in the RAF intelligence records that peculiar things, that's what they call them, happened as early as June, July 1940. But the recording of those incidents is very vague, and I'm yet to find particular documents that go into them in much detail.
Most people today recognize the name Foo Fighters with the band.
They do.
And if we look at it at a UFO sense, the one thing that we have been kind of drummed into us for the last 4 years is that ufology really didn't get serious until the 2004 Nimitz incident. And basically last year's DNI report really stated, don't worry about anything previous to 2004. This is where we're starting from, even though we now know that the stories are much different. And I'm asking you regarding the whole Foo Fighter incident up until now. I mean, what is how can I phrase this? How can we go about looking at this as an important part of history rather than sweeping it under the rug? Because these pilots and air crew were trained observers, more so than any fighter pilot today, because they didn't have the instrumentation. They knew what they were looking at, even though we would call it today anecdotal evidence.
Yeah. I think modern ufology has always been accepted, at least as far as, since I've been alive and reading about it, as being Kenneth Arnold as being the start of modern ufology. But that actually sort of forgets about the ghost rockets in 1946 in Sweden and other parts of Scandinavia and actually other parts of Europe, but also the Foo Fighters. And I can use that term not just for the balls of light, but for effectively as a catch-all term for everything that happened during World War II, because there were other shapes, other types of craft or light that were observed during World War II as well. But it's a convenient phrase to use for the purposes of this argument. So yeah, it would be lovely to have a kind of a tacit kind of acknowledgement that ufology or UFOs existed large scale in terms of numbers of sightings well before 1947, well before June 47, into World War II. And you're right, there were tens of thousands of people in the skies every day, every night. There were trained observers, there were trained recorders, and then you have all the soldiers on the ground who were, pulling guard duty, who had to look up in the skies as well to make sure, aircraft weren't attacking their positions. All this kind of thing. There were lots of people primed and ready to detect, observe, and record all this kind of thing going on. And actually, it wasn't just half a dozen reports of American aircrew seeing strange things over Germany over the winter of 44. It was hundreds of reports, and they're only the ones I can find. There will be others in the archives which I haven't come across yet, that and other people haven't come across yet either, which are begging to be sort of told. Now, in terms of the reporting itself, it's patchy. I've used this, I've talked about this on other shows, but the squadron reporting in terms of the RAF is very patchy. You'll get some squadrons where you'll get a line-by-line account of each aircraft for each raid, and that's really good. And that reporting, the stuff I've lifted out of those reports, is quite a good chunk of the book in terms of the RAF side of things. But then you'll get a kind of middle ground as well, where you'll get maybe a summary for a raid, and it'll be a few paragraphs, but it just covers the whole raid and the whole number of aircraft. So you don't get that much reporting, and it's difficult to pull out the information from that. And then other squadrons had practically nothing. You were lucky if you even got the number of bombs they dropped and the time they dropped them on the target. So there's some squadrons you'll get nothing from because there wasn't that amount of information that was given during the war, even in the official records. Whereas others, it's like a kind of, it's the mother lode of getting of information that, well, that's strange. What's this about? A strange light following an aircraft, and that's the kind of reports you used to read. There's some really good stuff in the RAF records. There's some great stuff in the U.S. Army Air Force records as well. It's just trying to find it. And people like Jan Alric, people like Keith Chester, Jeff Linsell, who did a whole load of stuff back in the 90s, I believe, talking to pilots to get their side of these stories. That's great, but there's still stuff in the records, I bet, that just hasn't been found yet.
Well, I want to ask you this, and it's such an obvious question, but it still needs to be asked. Why is the history of UFOs more important today than it was previous to the last 4 years? Why do these stories need to come out?
They need to come out because it's it's acknowledgement that actually these things haven't just started in 2004, 2017. There's actually parallel. It's not just the fact that sightings have been, things have been sighted since 1942, 1947. Pick a year. There's also parallels. So here's something. I mean, some of your audience might have heard me talking about this before, but there are parallels between the things that happened during World War II and the Nimitz incident of 2004. Now that was that latter incident, the Dave Fravor and Alex Dietrich, was generally accepted to be some kind of a dogfight between Fravor's F-18 and the Tic Tac. They were going round and round circles. Effectively, he was trying to get on the tail of this object. He was cutting a corner at one point, and then it obviously shot off in the distance. But that's accepted to be a dogfight. These things happen in World War II. There are documented cases in terms of the pilots' logbooks. And also in another case of a letter that a New Zealand pilot wrote to the New Zealand Air Minister in 1955, detailing what happened. There are engagements between RAF fighters and night fighters and strange lights. So you have a pilot in the spring of 1943 over North Africa near Monastir, He was 73 Squadron. He was a Hurricane pilot. They were flying night intruder missions over German targets. And he's flying over the German lines, and this orange light sits on his wingtip. And it doesn't matter what he does, he can't shift it. It just sits there, at some kind of distance of his wingtip. It's a light, so he can't tell how big it is. He can't see how far away it is, but it's at some point of his wingtip. It doesn't matter what he does, flying around the sky, trying to do turns, banks, dives, all the rest of it. It sits there. After a while, he realizes that every time he maneuvers, he actually has a bit of a gain on this light. It doesn't react to him straight away. There's a bit of a kind of a time lapse. So he manages to get behind it at one point, and he opens fire at it. And the Hurricane was armed with 4 20mm cannon. So then, they're not pop guns. They're things that can rip apart a tank and soft-skinned vehicles. But nothing happened. The light just kept on flying. And he did this a few times until his ammunition was almost exhausted. And then this light just started following him, and then sitting on his wingtip. He flew back over his own lines and it disappeared. He then turned round to try and complete his mission. He had some ammunition left, and it was back again. So this is that kind of dogfight kind of thing where it's a parallel to 2004. There was a night fighter pilot from 239 Squadron over southern Italy, over the Naples area. Kind of similar thing, except it didn't open fire. But they got into an engagement where they were going round and round in a spiral from about 3,000 feet to about 12,000 feet, with this, him trying to get on the tail of this light, and the light just going around circles and getting away from him. So, there are other engagements like that. So here's your parallels. So it's important to realize that these things didn't just start happening in 2004. They happened, 70 years beforehand. Sorry, 60 years beforehand. It's early.
And I can appreciate that, because I like the history. I think we have to build patterns. Patterns is going through those stories, whether it's the Foo Fighters of World War I or II, or even going up through the Korean and Vietnam War. I mean, there are so many accounts and stories of, and we don't even know if any of our fighters were shot down by any of these. There's the alleged story coming out of Vietnam where a B-52 bomber was allegedly shot down by a UFO. Okay, and that one I've only ever seen in one article. I mean, going back to World War II, was there engagement with these Foo Fighters?
There were engagements, but they were one-sided. So it was the RAF gunners shooting at things they didn't know what they were. That happened on not just one occasion. That happened on several occasions where there were either lights that they fired at, or there were small, indeterminate craft, things that didn't look like anything else that the Germans had, that just appeared out of nowhere, or things that looked like rockets, that there were lights carrying smoke trails that were going zigzagging after airplanes. None of these things were in the German inventory, by the way, but there were things that were shot at. Some of them were even claimed as being shot down by the crews, and you'll see that in the squadron records, which is really weird. But we can get into that if you want in a different way. The Americans themselves, on their daytime raids over Germany, there are reports of things falling onto bomber formations. Shoals of little black discs is one particular story that appeared in the 1960s. And one of these objects is supposed to have landed on the wing of an aircraft and started burning. So there are, whether those were kind of inadvertent attacks, or whether it was, pre-planned, premeditated, or whether it was just some happy accident, then who knows? But you're right. Some aircraft may have been downed in some matter or form, and we won't know because those pilots or those crews never came back. We can only hear from the stories of the living. So it's difficult to determine what kind of whether there were attacks or not. But in terms of the reports that you can read and the ones that you can you hear about, then no, there was no hostile action from the other side, if you like.
Doesn't that go against the grain, as we got about 45 seconds here, about everything we've told and been learned about these threat narratives?
It depends where you come from for the threat narrative, because you can see from an intelligence and a military perspective, if they're dealing with things they don't understand, there's a potential for things to go wrong, and for potential for things to become a shooting war, if you like. Whereas, on the other side of the argument is, yes, they're not doing anything threatening, so they'll continue to do that way. But unfortunately, you can't take that as being read. And I can understand why people are a bit worried in the military and the intelligence community as to what the potential of these objects are. If they can run rings around the best interceptors and the best missile systems and all the rest of it that planet Earth has, then what potential do they have should they choose to use it? If that is a they, that even so, you can understand where it comes. You can understand where it comes from.
Absolutely. Graeme Rendle, we got you for another hour here on Spaced Out Radio. Foo Fighters, UFOs, the history. Graham's latest book, it's a good one. Great cover as well. UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 45. The foreword by Sean Cahill, who has an immaculate hair and beard combination. Spaced Out Radio continues after this. All right, we got about 6 minutes here.
Okay.
6 minutes. I'm just going to take a quick break here. I'll be right back, okay?
Right, yeah, I'm going to refresh my coffee cup.
Sounds good. Sorry about that. All right, we got about 3 minutes left. Having fun yet?
Yeah, great. I'm enjoying it.
I got to admit that I was reading up on you before the show earlier today, and my questions are not coming out properly, and I don't know why.
Okay.
So, my bad. I'll try
no need to apologize
here. Just making sure I haven't missed anybody in the chat room here. Mr. Cowley, there he is. Let's sing along, everyone. Mr. Cowley, dun dun dun. Welcome back to the show. Oh, Mr. Cowley, dun dun dun. Loves his spaced out radio. There we go. Always got to get that in for Mr. Cowley. Thank you, Horror Realm, for that awesome super chat. Very much appreciated. Also, thank you to Stephen, Terry, Vaughn, and Dragon L. Amazing super chats tonight. It's a great way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. So thank you so much. And we got just over a minute here to go. And we got some great swag for you at spacedoutradio.com. Go check it on out. There's honestly, it's really fun stuff. Really fun stuff, and I hope you all enjoy it and pick up your swag. It's a good way to support what we do on this daily basis as well. So thank you, and yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got. And we got about 30 seconds. Thank you to all the veterans who have tuned us on in, and everybody who is going to Las Vegas this week for the first annual SOR fan party. And we are also already planning next year. Yeah, we are going to have a blast. Here we go, everyone, with hour 2.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune us on in. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. What do you got for us tonight, Clam? Jazzophone. Jazzophone is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. From the UK, Graeme Rendle is here talking about Foo Fighters during World War II. His book, UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 1945, is on any major bookstore or online. You can find it on Amazon, of course, and it's well worth the read. Great history here. Graeme, welcome back.
Hi, Dave. I'm on my second cup of coffee, so I'm finally awake.
Well, good. Good. I'm still sipping water. Nice, boring water. But we're going to continue on here with the Foo Fighters and everything because, look, ufology today over the last few years has really shifted into a technological advancement. Everybody wants to know the propulsion. Everybody wants to know how these craft are moving, what is controlling them. We tend to forget that there might be little gray aliens that are flying these things. We don't want to admit that yet. You know, going back in time where we were seeing these previous to World War II, building up through the major wars right through the 20th century, which seemed like there was a new major battle every decade, to where we are now. What has changed in your mind with ufology in the way we are reporting on this phenomena?
That's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me that one before. I guess in the early days, I mean, the things I've been writing about, nobody knew even though there were aliens, or there were, possibly of aliens, possibility of UFOs. It was all to do with there must be German secret weapons. So that was a methodology, and that was the thinking during World War II. You get into 1946 and the ghost rockets, and even into 1947 with Kenneth Arnold's sighting and the ones that have followed straight afterwards. And the thinking is that they are possibly Russian devices which have been based on captured German technology. And there was quite a lot of thinking along those lines at that time, that the Swedes were certainly sort of under the belief that things were coming across from Russia or from the occupied parts of Eastern Europe. So I think there was a bit of a kind of a change at some stage where people thought, well, actually, no, these could be things from outer space, for want of a better term, that the kind of technology or the perceived technology that was being demonstrated, and the performance, the maneuverability of these objects that were being seen, both by people on the ground and people in the skies, just seemed to be light years ahead of current and contemporary of aeronautical technology. So they were much quicker than the propeller-driven fighters, and then the early jets, and then the slightly better jets that people were coming along with in the 50s and 60s. And then even when we started developing rockets to take us out into the low Earth orbit, and then eventually to the moon, these things were nothing like those either. They could fly around, they could stop on a dime almost, they could hover, they could then fly off really quickly. The things that are being reported now were reported back then. You just have to dig into the records. So I think the information's always been the same to a certain degree, where the same phenomenon has been, or something that looks like the same phenomenon has been reported and has been observed. But in terms of people's acceptance of it, maybe not widespread, but the people who are interested and the people who have experienced it for themselves, then that's been a gradual process. So as more and more people have either seen it or have read about it, then obviously it gets traction and it becomes a bit more mainstream, to the point of now where everybody, is aware of UFOs. Whether they choose to believe it or not is obviously up to their individual kind of, their likes and dislikes and what they're prepared to believe in. But that only gets you so far as well. There's still not a major acceptance worldwide. There's actually a reality to it. There's just a reality to the actual phenomenon that people seem to think it exists, and that's the general consensus across the planet if you ask people, I think. But there's a smaller hardcore of people who definitely believe it's true. There's a smaller group of skeptics and debunkers who think there's definitely nothing to it, and then everybody else in the general public probably sits somewhere between that, or maybe just has no view whatsoever. They're more interested in sport or what's happening on the news or Kim Kardashian or something like that.
So with UFOs today, and the history that kind of blends them together, are we really missing the fact, or have we played as a public right into the government's hands on, and when I say governments, I mean governments around the world, their hands into our naivety about this subject?
I think it's easy for governments to be able to obfuscate and to release information or not to release information that they don't want to have in the public realm. They've always kept secrets, whether it's UFOs or whether it's just financial matters or other political matters or other, just you name it. There's a way they can keep things secret. The Brits have been really good at secrecy and spying for years. We effectively taught the world about how to spy on people. The Americans took lessons from us in terms of when they built their OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, during World War II. They based that on MI5, MI6 kind of thing. So there's people have been doing this for a long time. So if something else comes along the track, like UFOs, then it's just another subject to hide away. And that's probably all it is. Now, whether or not the governments themselves, and governments around the world, as you say, whether they actually have understanding of what's happening, that's another debate altogether. They may have knowledge, but that knowledge doesn't equate to understanding, let's say. I use an analogy like this. I mean, people talk about reverse engineered craft. There's all these stories about Bob Lazar and things that have been hidden at S4 and Area 51 and other crashes around the world that may or may not have been reverse engineered. I look at it this way, is that you give Sir Isaac Newton an iPhone 11, like the one I've got. So I give him this, and it's got no battery power in it. He's got a dead iPhone 11, and you just go, there you go, Isaac. See what you made of that. What's he going to do with it? He doesn't know what it is. First of all, he's got no concept of a telephone, let alone the electronics and the microchips and the touchpad and all the rest of it to do with an iPhone. He's only got a bit of glass, a bit of plastic, and some metal. He doesn't know what it is. He can't open it up, because if he opens it, you'll break it. And even then, that won't get him anywhere, because he doesn't know what the innards are. He can't understand it. So he can't recognize it for what it is. So he's got no understanding of what an iPhone is. Give a Victorian scientist an atomic bomb. Now, they might open it up to find out what it is, because they've got no concept of what it does or what the dangers are. They'll kill themselves in the process. And then somebody else comes along to find out what's happening, and they'll do the same. So there's all this kind of inherent, danger in looking at things as well. But I just think that knowledge of this subject in terms of the government side of things, that'll only get them so far. And they might just be the point that actually they don't even know what they're looking at. They've got data, they've got evidence, but that might not equate to actual understanding of what's happening. I could be wrong. And it could be the fact that they are consorting with grey aliens from Zeta Reticuli, the rest of it, or they're building their own fleet of spaceships that they've recovered from things in the desert and the rest of it. But I get the feeling that they're as much in the dark as we are. It's just they're not prepared to admit it for all the kind of sort of things that entails. And yes, they're sitting on a lot of information, but that's actually all it is.
You have met personally and had private discussions with people like Sean Cahill, Lou Elizondo, and others regarding this phenomena. What is Graeme Rendle convinced on what is known about UFOs?
I've had a dinner with Lou Elizondo, and I have spoke to Sean Cahill, on private chat, etc. But it's not necessarily something that comes up. We don't sort of ask directly what these things are, because in one way, if you talk to Sean, he in some ways he's as much in the dark as everybody else is, I believe, because yes, he's had his own experience, but does that mean to say he's then knowledgeable about exactly what this phenomenon is? I don't believe so. You'd have to ask Sean that, though, as to what he knows, etc. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so we haven't actually had detailed conversations about what he says these things are, or what he believes these things are. And as for Lou, I sat around a dinner table with him in London for 2 hours with my colleagues from UAP Media UK. But did we talk about what these things are and exactly what they are? We talked about a lot of things, but we didn't necessarily talk about what you're saying there. We just had a really interesting conversation, just about a general kind of conversation as well about a whole load of things that cropped up. But in terms of specifics, no, we don't know what things are. And I can't speak for Lou, and I won't speak for Lou either. So.
Well, no, and I understand that that's a very difficult topic. They are only going to tell us right now what they can tell us. And I think that's a fair assessment of everything that is going on regarding if we could call it the phenomena. And when it comes to the governments of the world, I tend to believe that they know a heck of a lot more than we already know.
I'm sure they do.
It doesn't matter whether it's the UK, the talking heads, whether it's, and this is said with all due respect to Elizondo or somebody like, Nick Pope, who is in dire need of a new hairdo. I mean, we need to be able to get past the talking heads and get into the information in order to forewarn the public about whatever this phenomena is and how it will affect us in the future. Do you think we're stalling on something? Do you think that we are just treading around the outer edges of the UFO swimming pool rather than jumping off the deep end?
I guess it comes down to whether or not governments, and plural, whether they're confident enough that they know what it is, and therefore they can tell their public what it is without sounding weak. Let's say you have to look at it this way: that no government wants to say to its citizens, "I don't know what's happening. I'm not in control, or we're not in control of what's going on." Every time there's a crisis, or every time there's something that needs to be done, your government representatives always come on the mass media, etc., and they come up with a plan of action. Now, whether that action ends up being effective or not is a completely different ball game. But they're always coming across reasonably confident as that they know what the problem is, and they have a kind of plan to fix it, or address it, or do something about it. Now, this is something completely different, I believe. And it comes back to what I said before about, I believe they have the knowledge, but I don't believe they have the understanding. So therefore, if you were then to say, like Boris Johnson in this country was to come up and say, we know there's something going on, but we don't know what it is. Well, people wouldn't believe him anyway because it's Boris. But also they would laugh, and they would then also, some people would be frightened because here's a politician, here's the leader of our country saying, here's something, but we don't know what it is, and we don't know how to deal with it. Similarly, if Joe Biden said the same thing to his citizens in America, or to Trudeau said that in Canada, or Macron in France, or even, God forbid, Putin in Russia, said things like that to their own people, then, well, what does that say about them? Because you can't necessarily then trust your leaders if they do they know what they're talking about. If they suddenly start talking about UFOs seriously, bearing in mind all the stigma that's come from mass media, from the talking heads and everybody else over the past 70, 80 years, and now they're suddenly doing a volte-face and talking about UFOs as being something real, tangible, and here, then people are going to believe them. Are they going to have any kind of sort of confidence in their leaders anymore? Does it shake foundations of society, religion, all the rest of it? Or do people just go, I don't know what you're talking about, kind of thing? I can imagine it's quite difficult for governments to actually wrestle with this, because at one point they want to keep their citizens safe, and they don't want to sow sort of seeds of discord or get everything societal upheaval. But do they want also? Are they sitting on stuff that they do want to release, but they're trying to find the right way of doing it? And at the moment, it's just a case of burying it until that time arises, or are they just sticking their head in the sands because it's something that they can't deal with, and they just want the problem to go away? If you look back and I'll go back to the Foo Fighters, let's say, go back to World War II, the actual information that went back from the squadrons to the intelligence people for analysis, and I'm not just talking about the squadron intelligence officers, I'm talking about the people in RAF Bomber Command, in the United States Army Air Force at much senior levels, when they were given the information about what the pilots were seeing, they didn't know what they were looking at. They had no frame of reference. They also didn't know, they didn't have any concept of aliens or flying saucers back then. But they had this information about stuff they just couldn't understand. And the questions that they were then passing back to the squadrons was like, well, you say it's a ball of light. What part of the aircraft is attached to? But they were so, well, no, it's not attached to an aircraft. It's literally just a ball of light. So there was this lack of understanding there. And it got to the point where they just washed their hands of it, because they got to a stage where they didn't have any more questions to ask. There wasn't any more information coming forward. So they hit a brick wall in terms of trying to analyze what it was. It wasn't like dealing with a V1 or a V2 where they had information. They had information from the ground, from resistance workers, or they had pictures of these things from photo reconnaissance aircraft, or in some cases they actually had wreckage that they could look at and examine and determine what these things were. When you're talking about flying saucers and you're talking about lights, they were effectively stories at the end of the day, anecdotal evidence or information from pilots, which was down in records, but nothing else. So you can understand why they got to a point where they just held their hands up and went, sorry, we don't know what this are. We'll come back to it sometime when we got more information. And maybe that's just where the progression is lain through history, where they get so much information, but they get to a point where they can't go any further. And it's right, we'll just wait until we have a bit more information. And going back to, I mentioned Bob Lazar before, my theory on what's going on in Area 51 S4 has changed multiple times over the years as more information's coming in. And I get to the point now where I think if they have, and it's an if they have craft, then they may have got so far with the examination of this stuff, but they might have got to a point where, again, you've got Isaac Newton with an iPhone going, well, I can't do anything more with this. I've learned as much as I can with it. I can't get it to fly. I don't even know how it works. We'll have to wait now until 20 years have passed maybe, and we'll have a better understanding of physics, of technology, of engine technology, all the rest of it. And yes, we'll go and have another look at it. And maybe they do just dust these things down every few years and go, right, we've got a bit more knowledge. Now, can we apply that to this and see whether it works, or we can get inside it, or we can fly it? But, so there you go.
So many questions for you, Graeme. Before I forget this one, I want to ask you this. About 6-8 months ago, in the House of Lords over the UK, it was debated about what the UK and the Ministry of Defence knew about UFOs. The Ministry of Defense absolutely refused to answer any questions after about 2 to 4 hours of hard questions from the opposition regarding the UK's knowledge of the UAP phenomena. Were you surprised that A, it got to the floor, but B, that it was shot down so quickly?
Funnily enough, the Lords, because they're our second chamber in terms of lawmaking, they have had UFO debates. It's a much more congenial atmosphere in terms of, if you couldn't have those debates on the House of Commons unless something landed in a very open space in London and it was incontrovertible. So the House of Lords do have these debates very, very occasionally, but I'm not surprised that the questioning was shot down by the minister who had to field the questions, because the MOD over the last 50 years have had this mantra where there's nothing to see here, move on. There are no matters of defence significance. That's what they say. And yet that we know that's wrong. We know that things have happened. There have been things have seen. And if they're being seen in UK airspace, then that is a defence issue. If there are things that are unexplainable, which are not able to be intercepted by our jet fighters and our, this kind of thing, then that is a defence issue, whether or not they say it is or not. Unless, of course, they know what they are. And then that might mean that they're telling the truth. But as far as we understand it, there are things that are going on in the skies over the UK that they're just, for whatever reason, they're choosing not either to ignore or not to acknowledge publicly.
All right. Now, the second question is something that you said momentarily about whether or not we have the technology to reverse engineer these craft. Are you in the belief, as I am, that we do have craft from another world or another civilization that we have had the ability to work on, but maybe we just haven't figured out, the right screwdriver to use or the right drill to get in the door?
I mean, I've got no proof of all this, because you read a lot of stories about, what's happened in the past. And I think at one time I was definitely under the impression that something had crashed at Roswell. But then when you read more and more about it, you start thinking, well, some of these witnesses don't stand up. And then you wonder about the rest of the story. So at the moment, I'm left wondering how much of these stories are true. It's not to say that I don't believe them. There's still probably time for information to come out, or for some big unveil to say, yes, we've got these things. So at the moment, I don't know is my answer. But if these things exist, and it's an if, then yes, it probably will be a case of, look, we're just waiting for the opportunity to come along to say, yeah, we can, you've got the right screwdriver, as you say, to actually open it up and work out what's going on. But I think if they do have them, they're probably not as clued up on these things as people seem to give them credit for. I don't think we're that far ahead, unless, of course, they've gifted them to us. I use the word they pejoratively, or they've gifted them to us, and we've had contact with them, inverted commas, and they've told us how to use them. And some people seem to think that's a thing as well. What the truth is, I'm afraid I've got no idea. I've read so much over the years since I was a kid about all these kind of crashes and crash retrievals that I get to the point now where, as George Knapp says, that the more I read or the more I learn, the less I understand. And I'm afraid that's where I fall into now. There's so much information, some of it that conflicts. Some of the witnesses turn out not to be credible, especially in terms of Roswell. And therefore, you're left wondering just how much of the overall story is true. But I'd like to think, certainly, yes, that what your question in terms of are the things around and the governments around the world have. Yeah, I'd love to think that's true.
I still love what Lou Elizondo said in his last appearance on the UFO Garage with good friends of ours, Ben and Joe, where he said, you don't send an entire platoon for a weather balloon. And he goes, number two, you don't send a triaxle heavy-duty trailer to pick up a weather balloon. And he said that with quite a nice smile on his face. Yeah. And I always look at that and think, Thank you for that. But it's amazing, as we only got about 20 seconds left, it is amazing, though, how many people cannot decipher what he just said. It blows my mind. Graeme, we got you for another half an hour. We're going to get to some questions from our audience here coming up, because I know those are starting to build, and we're having a great time with you tonight here and tomorrow morning where you are, since you live in the future. We appreciate it. Graeme Rendall's book, UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 45, can be found on Amazon or at rivercountrybooks.com. It's REIVER, countrybooks.com. We'll be back with more Graeme Rendle right after this. All right, we're clear.
Okay.
Good stuff so far, man.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, the Reivers that you talked about there, Reiver Country Books. So Reivers are used to be gangs of marauding families who used to go across the English to Scottish border, stealing each other's cattle back in the day. And there was a big thing over this part of the world where the feuding families over the Scottish and English border. So that's where that comes from.
Good times.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
times.
There's lots of world scores to be settled back in those days.
Oh, yeah. I hear you there, my friend. I hear you there. What's next up for you?
I have another book coming out shortly in the next couple of weeks, but I can't really talk much about it, I'm afraid, because I've got somebody else writing the forward for it, and I don't want to sort of give the game away. But it's somebody that people will know. It's a bit like a Sean Cahill moment. I was really pleased when Sean, said, "Yes, I'll write the forward for you," and I was very surprised because I'm still a nobody, but I was definitely a nobody back then. And it's kind of like beyond your wildest dreams that somebody who you've read about and you've thought, I would love to have you write something, and they go, "Yes, I'll do it." So that was great, and I was equally amazed and pleased when the person who I asked to do this one said, "Yes, I'll do it as well."
That is awesome, man. That is awesome. And once you gain the reputation, it's amazing who picks up the phone to call you sometimes.
You get that kind of momentum. It's like a snowball, sort of gathering snow as it rolls downhill. Again, imposter syndrome. I do occasionally think, am I really doing this? Are people really wanting to read this? Do people really want to talk to me? And I'm having a hell of a job shaking that occasionally. So
that's not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, well, I think it grounds you as well. It makes sure that you don't get too big for your boots, because the last thing I want to do is come across as being, oh, I know this, I know that. I'm the oracle. I'm not. In so many different ways. I've got, I like to think I've managed to find a really minuscule bit of the puzzle. But how much that affects other people, then I've got no idea. And I'm just grateful that people read the book and have time for me to prattle on about stuff. It's wonderful.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. You know what I like about you is you're very humble about it. There's no arrogance to what you've been able to learn or uncover or what have you over the last, couple of years. It's kind of been your own coming out party regarding it.
Well, I guess, I suppose in some way it's more just having the time and the energy and the determination to go through it and take that information out of the records. If I hadn't done it, maybe somebody might have done it, but maybe somebody might not have as well. So I felt it was important to do it and to get that information out for people to read, and to do it in a coherent fashion that people had so could read through my arguments. Whether they choose to believe what I've written is also up to them. I can't make people say, look, this is what this is the truth, because at the end of the day, I can only go so far. I can only present an argument and hope people sort of buy it, for want of a better phrase. But if they do, that's great. If they don't, well, that's equally fine, because they've made the effort and they've looked at something which is beyond what has been in the public realm for years. The Foo Fighters have been something that have been forgotten about for years and haven't been really looked at in much detail. And yet this is hopefully, I would like to think this is a springboard for other people which have maybe access to the American records to go through stuff which I maybe not have the time to do at the moment. People in the UK to go through the records in London as well, and just look for things like that. The information's there. You just have to look for it.
Oh, very much so, my friend. very much so. And that's something that I think we as people and fans of this entire phenomena take for granted at times. I really do believe that.
Yeah, it was interesting because the more I found, the more I wanted to find as well. So it got this momentum building, and I got to the point where I had to go, right, I've got to stop here because this book's now 550 pages and I can't write anymore. It's gonna be too thick to fit through people's letterboxes. So I had to stop somewhere. So I've got some material for a follow-up, and I've got material sort of amassing for a book about the Pacific War as well. But they'll be long-term projects because it does take time to actually go through all this information. But it's still enjoyable. I'm still getting a real kick out of sort of finding new things, and that's part of it as well. It's that kind of when you get a little bit of information that you think that nobody's had before, and maybe it's been buried away for 50, 60, 70 years, and you just think, wow, it might not be a huge thing to a lot of people, but for me as a researcher, it's it's catnip.
I'm just going to get you to hold on right there. Say a big thank you to Horror Realm, Stephen, Terry, Vaughn, and Dragon L for the awesome super chats. Very much appreciate the love and support. Don't forget you can shop for your SOR swag on our website, spacedoutradio.com. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Very much appreciate you coming on in. My name is Dave Scott, host from SOR HQ. I want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Graeme Rendle is here tonight. He's got a great book out, UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 1945. And I want to start off with an audience question here from Brown Dwarf in our YouTube chat. Was there a connection between these Foo Fighters and the Nazis in World War II?
So people have tried to make connections between the two over the years. So you can't help but read websites and some books that say there was definitely a connection. And I do address this in my book, but I'll explain briefly. The stories that the Germans allegedly built a fleet of flying discs during World War II and test flew them. And therefore, these were things that the Allied pilots were seeing. Now, those stories, unfortunately, suffer from a number of things. One is that there's no proof whatsoever that the Germans ever did this. There's people who say they have proof, but when you try to ask them for the proof, it turns out to be a whole load of fake photographs that can be shot down quite easily. And there are no documents at all beyond things that were manufactured in the 60s by some neo-Nazi groups who were trying to big up the Nazis' achievements during World War II, that the Germans ever did anything like this. And actually, when you trace these stories of flying discs back to their sources, you end up in about 1950, where the first magazine and newspaper articles in German newspapers and publications, and Italian publications, were of interviews with so-called, I use that phrase, so-called German wartime engineers and designers who allegedly built these things. But their stories their stories change in the telling when they talk to different newspapers, and they actually they conflict with each other as well. They tell a whole load of things that simply couldn't have happened for various reasons, and I go into those in much more detail in the book. But you trace these stories back, and you get to a point where you can't go back any further. You certainly can't go back to World War II because there is simply no documentation. But also, when you look at the German kind of performance in the war and how much industry, how much kind of facilities for testing, the manpower they had, all the rest of it, at that time when they reckoned these things were supposed to be built, it was impossible because they were actually going backward in some respects in terms of the technology they were using. They were trying to dig up designs for aircraft that had already thrown out because they were impractical, but they were going to go back to them because it was like kind of a last-minute desperation move. They were building weapons, which were the simplest things ever. They were designing things for their version of the Home Guard, the Volkssturm, which were effectively bits of pipe that they were built into submachine guns. And they were literally bits of pipe welded together with a little bit of a gun built on them for mass production to fight against the Russians. So this is the kind of desperation they were into. And you think they're going to fly, fleets of flying discs? It's just not possible. But I go into a lot more of the arguments in the book. So the people who say, yes, the Germans had these amazing devices in the war that were the Foo Fighters, they forget that the Germans didn't have this technology. Some people think they were German flak rockets. The Germans did build surface-to-air missiles. That's a matter of fact. But unfortunately, when you look at the history of these things, which I've done and other people have done, then you'll see that they never fielded an operational system. They couldn't get them to work. They had problems with the engines, not just the solid fuel booster rockets, but also the liquid fueled engines that they use as sustainer motors for the two-stage weapons. They had problems with the proximity fuses to detonate the warheads when they were near enough to a bomber formation. They had different difficulties with guidance systems. So they would get to perfect one or more of these things, but they couldn't get them all together in the same platform at the same time to work. And also they couldn't guide them from the ground either through radio control. That was quite difficult as well. So, and especially at night, as as most of these Foo Fighter reports were seen at night, reported at night, sorry. So there's a whole load of things where, yes, the Germans were very ingenious in terms of technology, but putting together things on this much more increased scale to try and get the things that were doing the kind of things that the Foo Fighters and other objects that were seen during World War II were reported as doing, that's off the charts. The Germans didn't have that kind of technology, I'm afraid.
Right. So do you think at all there is anything to those rumors that the SS back then had any contact, whether it was through the Vril or governmental, that they had any contact whatsoever with extraterrestrial species?
Not at all. There's a Flights of Fantasy. I remember a VHS video. It was UFO Secrets of the Third Reich, I believe it was called. And it had all that kind of stuff. The Vril, the Andromeda Gerät, the Andromeda apparatus, it was called. This huge spacecraft that they were supposed to have built. And all these other things, the Aldebaran connection that it went to. And to me, it was poorly researched because it had no real evidence in it. They had a lot of drawings, they had a lot of pictures of CGI for the time and some models. But beyond that, there was no actual evidence. And as a historian and as a researcher, that's the only thing that counts. People can tell stories. I've actually got a story in the book which is to do with that kind of thing. But it doesn't make, just because it's a story and it's written down in print, doesn't mean to say it's real, because there's nothing to actually back it up at all. And all these things, all these so-called elements about Vril, Aldebaran, and all these kind of stuff, there's no evidence that it actually happened beyond people just making all these stories up. And these came out in the 50s and 60s as well, this angle. But then you trace it further back and you don't get anywhere. You certainly don't get any wartime connection beyond some people's twisting on the head of a pin, trying to make it fit into certain areas. But I'm afraid it just suffers from, lack of provenance.
Well, very true. Let's get to a question from Benji here, who is asking, what came as the biggest shock to you while researching for your book?
Okay. So the accepted wisdom in terms of Foo Fighters and other things that were seen in World War II effectively confine the phenomenon to a specific part of Europe. So you're looking at kind of Eastern Belgium, Eastern France, Western Germany, and some other places over Germany. Now, when I started looking through the records to find out, whether anywhere else in Europe had these kind of reports, I found plenty over Italy. I found some over Norway. I even found, and this is the big thing that I go to his question, there were hundreds of reports from the Balkans. So from RAF pilots flying nighttime missions over the Balkans in 1944 and 1945. And that's not just the time when the Foo Fighters were seen. I'm going back to early 1944. And there were particular squadrons flying over the likes of Bulgaria, over Romania, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. and they were seeing things as well. The stories of lights following or pursuing aircraft, or even in some cases multiple lights surrounding bombers from that particular period over Hungary, over Romania, over Bulgaria, and those were a real shock. So it shows that the geographical spread of these cases was much more widespread, which was originally thought. I've got cases from the North Cape of Norway, from the Eastern Front in World War II. There was a battle in February 1943 at Krasny Bor near Leningrad, what was Leningrad then. And in the course of the battle, Spanish soldiers who were fighting on the German side, it was the 250th Infantry Division, the so-called Blue Division, there were Spanish volunteers. There was a group of them watching this battle, and above the ground battle that was going on were Russian and German fighters in an engagement, but above them was something that they described as an upturned bathtub, watching what was going on. So there was other shapes. So there's another surprise. It wasn't just balls of light. There were bomber pilots, British bomber pilots flying over northern Italy on a raid to Turin in November 1942, saw a 200 to 300 foot long Zeppelin-type object flying over the Alps. They saw it twice. Now, that's a place where you never see airships, for a whole variety of reasons. But these things were seen in other parts of the Europe as well at different times. So there were whole loads of shapes and sizes. But the geographical spread was a huge surprise to me. But also, it wasn't just lights, it was other things as well.
Magnus would like to know, do you have anything on the battle for Los Angeles?
I do, and if you would like to listen to the upcoming episode of Unidentified Aerial Podcast, which is something I do with Dave Partridge of Shadows of Your Mind magazine, we will address that particular issue in a forthcoming episode.
Give us some juice a little bit. Give us a little juice.
Okay. It was an object that was tracked on a radar that appeared off the coast and was tracked inland across Los Angeles, and then it did a complete 180 and went back the same way it came. They fired something like 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft cannon fire at it, and nothing happened. They don't know what it was. The Japanese disclaimed any knowledge of it. They said it wasn't them. The Americans didn't send fighters up after this thing because they thought it was a prelude to an invasion by the Japanese or in a massive attack. But there is a particular photograph which has been retouched that shows an object coned by searchlights with anti-aircraft bursts going off around it. And it's an iconic image. It's truly amazing when you see it about what it shows or what it purports to show. Now, what it was, nobody knows. But they fired a hell of a lot of ammunition at something that was allegedly a balloon or was war nerves.
What do you think it was?
I have no idea. That's the God knows truth. I have no idea. I think I have an idea what it wasn't. It wasn't a Japanese float plane. It wasn't a balloon. But what it was, well, that's up for interpretation.
Well, the fact that there was that many rounds fired at it, and if it was that craft that was caught in the spotlights, it should have fallen if it was.
Well, that's it. But you remember before I was mentioning about things that were shot at during the war and nothing happened to them. So was it something else like that? And then what was that object? Those are the questions which we still haven't had answered.
Why do you think the Battle of LA, as it's known as, gets such little airplay compared to everything else that's happened UFO-wise in the United States?
Well, you can add the Foo Fighters to that, but it's a case of it was early in the war and then events overtook it. It was just one more chapter in the war. Nobody was bombed. It didn't, whatever it was, didn't drop bombs on Los Angeles. Unlike the night before, the day before, where a Japanese submarine had surfaced and they'd fired at the Elwood oil terminal. So there'd been damage done. So that was a big story at the same time. It was just written off to war nerves at the time, Dave. So it was one of these things that just got lost in the annals of history. So yeah, and bigger things came along afterwards. So people concentrate on Kenneth Arnold, 47, on Roswell. So it just got lost in the mist of time, I'm afraid.
Going back prior to World War II, going into World War I, and even previous to that, there were sightings of UFOs, but maybe it was the time and the technology, but people talk about seeing these strange airships and strange hot air balloon type of craft. Why do you think they were seeing those instead of what we're seeing today, whether it's Tic Tacs or black triangles or disc-shaped objects.
It's a funny thing, isn't it, Dave? Because you see this kind of progression, that the things that people are seeing are just ahead or somewhat ahead of what we have at the time. So you go back to the mid-1890s and people are seeing mystery airships. And yes, okay, people were dabbling with those kind of things then, but these objects seem to be well in advance of whatever mankind could put up at that time. And then you look at the ghost flyers of the 1920s and 30s, and these objects, which were described as aeroplanes, although they couldn't determine what exact type they were flying around in conditions where no self-respecting pilot would fly at that time. So they were flying in snowstorms, they were flying in fog. Pilots wouldn't fly because they would die in those kinds of conditions in those rudimentary aircraft from that time. And then when you get to World War II, yes, okay, we had quite fast propeller-driven aircraft, and we were experimenting with early jets and rocket-powered aircraft during the war, and yet these things were running rings around those types of aircraft as well. So it's another stage ahead. And then when you get to the flying saucers from the early 50s, they're again ahead of the early jet interceptors, and so it goes on. So it's always something is just ahead. Now, are these things being interpreted by people as manifestations, albeit slightly removed from what we had at the time? That's another debate entirely, because there is a train of thought where they mess with our heads. I'm sure you've heard of that before, where they can show themselves as what we want to see them as. And I've heard that sort of debated in the past. That may well be true, and if that's the case, then that would explain why they're looking like things that we understand, but they're or recognize, but they're just ahead, if you like. But again, that's another thing that we can't. But they do seem to be just ahead, or some way ahead of what we have at the moment.
Well, it always amazes me because, I mean, back then people wouldn't know what a disc is. People wouldn't know what a black triangle is, but you'd expect that somebody, even in the 14, 15, 1600s, on up to prior to World War II, that they would be able to say, yeah, it looked like a black triangle in the sky, not the fact that there was an actual ship from the water up in the air with the oars going back and forth to propel it. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I think people describe things in terms that they're comfortable with. I mean, you've heard the stories about Alexander, the Great, and his fiery shields. So, I mean, whether there's any truth to that is a different question. But people back in the Middle Ages were seeing fiery orbs in the sky. And then when you get to World War II, if you look at the actual intelligence documents which I've done, and you see the progression of what they call these things. So originally, back in about 41, 42, the RAF Operational Research Section, which is effectively the air intelligence branch of Bomber Command, talk about these things as just being lights. And then when you go a bit further into the war, they call them rockets, because they realized that the Germans were experimenting with rockets, which they were. But these things are much more advanced than the German devices. But then the terminology changes, so they start calling them rockets. And then when they realized that the Germans were experimenting with jets, not at night, because they weren't flying at night, but they know they had them. They thought they were flying at night. They call them jets. So you see this progression in how they call these things. And now, 47 start calling them flying saucers, flying discs. Actually, that was what they first started calling them as. But then they become flying saucers, and now we're calling them Tic Tacs. So the names change through history as well, but the phenomenon itself still remains the same. It's it's something we're still a hard time getting to terms with.
We got about 6.5 minutes left with you tonight. And I kind of want to turn the tides here, because you're also very knowledgeable about what's going on today with ufology. And I'd like to take a couple minutes to kind of get into that. And this kind of leads to Vaughn's question here. Do you believe that the phenomena is alien in nature or something closer to home?
Well, that's the argument, isn't it? So some people say they're extraterrestrials. Other people think they're ultra-terrestrials, so they're the ones that coincide on the planet with us. Some people think they're time travelers from the future. There might be something else entirely. Who knows? There could be one, or there could be all of those things. Again, these are things that we're still not entirely sure about. Certain people, and it's only certain people, have fixed kind of ideas, and they won't be shaken from the belief or the knowledge that these are one of those things. But I'm not, I'm still not swayed for any of them yet. I don't have enough information. And I like to have facts that I can look at and think, yeah, okay, that's that leads me to this conclusion. I've been looking at this for over 40 years, 45 years now, and I'm still no further forward as to which one of those categories this falls into. It could be one, it could be more of them, or it could be something completely different that we're still not aware of. It's not something that's made up. That I'm pretty sure about. It's not something that's just going on in our heads. Your experience might be something part of your subconscious. Me seeing the craft or object that I saw is something to do with me. I don't think it's that. But what it ends up as, I'm afraid I've got no idea. If I knew, I'd be picking like next week's lottery numbers.
Oh, I think we all would too. Where do you see ufology going within the next 3 to 5 years?
It depends on what information comes out over that time period. If we get more kind of things like that amazing moment in 2017 when we got those 3 videos, I think that pushes us forward. If we have this kind of steady, very, very steady drip, drip, drip of information where, yes, it's interesting, on a singular level, but it doesn't necessarily push us too much further down the road, then I think we're just going to go along as we are at the moment. We're going to get these little bits of information which maybe or maybe not take us further. But in the meantime, we're going to get people on UFO Twitter arguing with each other like we do at the moment every time there's a hiatus in these kind of developments. Meanwhile, there will be developments on the government where they may say they're going to do stuff, but whether they do or not is a different question. They've got these study groups now that they're going to form, allegedly to look at things in a much better way with much more accountability. But then on the other hand, then they say, we're not going to provide this information to the public. So 1 step forward, 2 steps back, maybe. Who knows? Ufology, you look back into history, and obviously I'm interested in history. You can see what happened beforehand. You can see that, study groups are reformed, like Sign, like Grudge, like Blue Book, but they turn out to be ways of hiding information or obfuscating information or just not doing anything at all. Now, is that going to happen with this new, the AOI MSG? Who knows? We're still early days yet. I don't think it's going to be as simple, and it's going to be this kind of rapid progress that some people think that, we're going to get this news really, really soon. I think people might have to be prepared to be, in for a long haul, that we might get some information, but I think in terms of that kind of golden shot, that magic bullet, I think that might be a long way off yet, I'm afraid.
Do we deserve to know?
I think we do. It's probably the major question that's left unanswered is, are we alone in that respect? Yes, we are. In terms of we're deserving to know the answer. There are so many people around the world who have been affected. You've been affected by it. I've been affected on a very small scale by it. Other people may not have, but they've still got the same desire to know. And you imagine how kind of groundbreaking and earth-shattering that knowledge would be, that if we finally determine that we're not alone in the universe, because at the moment, for all intents and purposes, we are, whether we like it or not. We haven't found that out yet. There's not a public, individuals have, like yourself, you say that you've had your experience and therefore you have your own proof. But in terms of the human race as a collective, that doesn't apply right across the board, I'm afraid.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, with 2 minutes to go here, what's your projections of what happens over the next little bit?
I think there will be revelations. I think there'll be things come out, but how far that pushes people down the track and how much that gets to that, eventual kind of acceptance, I can't answer that, I'm afraid, Dave. I'm not qualified enough. Anything I say is just a talking head, I'm afraid. I just don't have that kind of knowledge or that kind of forethought or kind of clairvoyancy, if you like, to be able to work out what's going to happen, I'm afraid.
Graeme, we got about 90 seconds with you. Tell everybody where they can find your book, your podcast, and more information about your work.
Okay, so the Unidentified Aerial Podcast can be found wherever you get your podcasts from. If you look for the Anomalous Podcast Network, you'll find it there. It's among all the podcasts on Andy's network. My book, which is UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters 1940 and 1945, you can get that through Amazon. So whichever Amazon affiliate you use, whether it's .ca or .com or .uk, etc., you'll find it. If you just do a search for my name, Graeme Rendle, or you look for UFOs Before Roswell, you'll find it there. It's available as an ebook, softback, or hardback. and it's 550 pages. My website is rivacountryBooks.com. You'll find links to the books I've written there and some other stuff to do with UFOs on there as well. So, and also at Border750 is my Twitter handle. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
And I appreciate you taking the time and really spending time with us for the first time on Spaced Out Radio. Graeme, it's been an absolute blast. I hope you didn't mind getting up early in the morning to do this with us.
No, I didn't. It's been an absolute pleasure, Dave. Thanks again for the invitation. I've really, really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Not a problem. We will definitely stay in touch since we have a few friends in common, and I'll fill you in what happens in Vegas for our SOR fan party as well. Coming up next on Spaced Out Radio, Hour 3, we head to the swamp. Our resident swamp dweller has another spooky story for us. Then the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson comes in with the unbiased UFO report. A jam-packed Hour 3 of Spaced Out Radio coming up right after this. Almost had to sneeze there. Almost.
Oh, it's been enjoyable. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed that.
I appreciate you coming in, man. Thank you so much for spending time with us and our audience. I hope we did you some justice tonight.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. Yeah, the questions are always good, and you never know what you're going to get. So it's always a thrill to say, "Oh yeah, that's the one I never heard before." So it's always nice to be stretched as well.
Quickly here, Shelley wants to know, before you leave, do you know anything about every 10 years? I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Should have to elaborate. If she wants to get in touch with me privately, I'll talk to her about it.
Perfect. All right, my friend. We'll send you back to bed or back to doing whatever you need to do now. Yeah,
breakfast.
I'm sure you're
now.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. All right.
Okay.
You take care.
Take care, Dave.
You again. Bye-bye. Graeme Rendle, everybody. What a great show that was. Hold on. Now that sneeze is going to come out. Oh, goodness. There we go. By the way, we are on air. On air. On air. Oh, my goodness. I will be back. Apparently, I'm going to have to blow my nose right after that. So, excuse me, guys. All right. Eva, how are you? All right. Thank you to Horror Realm and Stephen, Terry, Vaughn, and Dragonelle for the super chats tonight. We're going to get going here in about 5 seconds. So sit back, relax. Here comes Swamp Dweller.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on Odyssey Radio, TalkStream Live, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Join us at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Jazzophone. Jazzophone is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight with our good friend, Swamp Dweller, as we visit the swamp each and every night for a spooky story.
Hi, Spaced Out Radio listeners. This is Swamp Dweller. It's time for your nightly dose of spookiness on the show. If you have an interesting encounter or a spooky story that you would like to share, be sure to submit them in at swampdweller.net. You can also find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/swampdwellerreads. Now, let's chill out, relax, and together, let's enter the swamp. I live in the Ozark Mountains, and for the past 2 years, I have often had to drive through the Ozark National Forest for about 2 hours back and forth. It's a long stretch with no towns, no lights, just hills and trees as far as you can see. Nothing weird has ever happened to me on that drive. Well, like a month ago, I am driving the normal drive. It is sunny but hazy, and I feel something invade my thoughts. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. I got this buzzy feeling in my body, like something was trying to yank me out of it. It felt weird. I was not high, and I do not drink. I started feeling like something was talking to me, and it felt like it was coming from the hills or it was from the hills itself. It was basically conveying to me, without words, that it wasn't male or female, and it was really old and needed energy devoted to it, but had to be mutually given. None of it was in words, it was just like I suddenly knew this. I pulled over as I came out of the mountains because I felt so weird. I chalked it up to just being tired, but every time I have had to drive through there in the past few weeks, I feel whatever it is pulling at me. The weirdest part happened last night and caused me to reach out. Please do not think I am weird, but I really don't have words for this. I dreamed I was having sex with nature, like these vines were forming into things that I was just getting intimate with. It was a very strange dream, and the weird thing is I knew I was dreaming the entire time, and I felt it kind of laughing at me, and the entire time I never actually saw it though. It was incredibly happy. This dream was just so weird, and honestly, I was not scared but more amazed. Let me repeat this, I was not high or drunk. I have no history of seizures, hallucinations, or any serious mental illness. I am tempted to chalk it up to my imagination, but it came out of nowhere and with no reference. What could I be experiencing? Should I just pull over one day and get out and see what happens? This happened to me when I was a teenager. I think it was the spring of 1998, when I was 14 years old. My Boy Scout troop went hiking in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. I grew up in an exceedingly small town in Tennessee, and the boys in my troop were people I had known my entire life, and we were all awfully close and knew each other very well and trusted each other with our lives. We had been hiking for 5 days or so, and honestly, it was quite miserable. It rained almost every single day, and we were all exhausted and incredibly sore and very hungry, and not to mention, covered with blisters. The adults realized we had bitten off more than we could chew in trying to hike a 60-mile trail, especially with the awful weather, and we had changed course and gotten off the trail to spend the night in a drive-in campground. Find a place with hookups for RVs and picnic tables and fire pits and grills, and a central bathhouse with showers and toilets. It was in a very remote area, far from any town or any houses. There may have been a few other small groups there, but if there were, we never interacted or saw any of them. We were all filthy and wet, and thus overly excited about taking a hot shower. It was dark and we had all finished dinner. A group of 5 of my friends, including my friend Jeremy, who, like everyone else in our group I had known since we were just babies, headed up to the bathhouse, which was maybe a quarter mile of a way. We had to walk through the pitch-dark woods up a worn-down gravel walking trail. I stayed behind to clean up, and after 10 or 15 minutes, followed them by myself. I had a weak little flashlight, the old iridescent kind. This was before LEDs were very common. I remember the woods were totally silent. When I got about halfway to the bathhouse, I could see the light from it off in the distance through the woods. I heard a noise to my left, and I looked over and saw my friend Jeremy standing by an old-school manual water pump, about 20 feet off the trail. The kind of pump where you raise and lower a handle to pump water up from a well. There was a strange light around him, like the moon had come out from behind the clouds. I was startled to see him there by himself in the woods off the trail. I asked him if he was already done with his shower. He seemed kind of sad, and he said, "Yeah, it's all yours." I said okay and did not think much of it until I got to the bathhouse. When I walked in the door, my friends were all in there, and I heard Jeremy talking from the shower. All the blood drained out of my head, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had to sit down before I passed out. My friends were freaked out and wanted to know what was wrong. I told them what had happened. They nervously made jokes about how I must have been smoking pot. This was long before any of us had experimented with any kind of mind-altering substances, mind you. But I could tell they all believed me. Like I said, we had known each other forever and knew when one of us was exaggerating or playing a joke. We all waited together until everyone was finished showering and brushing teeth and whatnot, and then walked back together in total silence. When we got to the lever, however, I had not seen anybody there. It's like he was gone without a trace. The water pump was there, though. No one noticed it, though, before, because it was way off the trail and obviously not in use. We got back to our campsite and went to bed pretty freaked out, honestly. I remember not sleeping much that night. In all the years since then, I have never been able to figure out what happened. Was there a random teenage boy in the woods who looked just like my friend? Which is unlikely. Did I hallucinate it? Also unlikely. But, ultimately, who is to say?
And we say thank you to our resident swamp dweller for a couple of weird stories tonight. We always enjoy it when he is here. You can check him on out. Go to youtube.com/Swamp Dweller Reads. Swamp Dweller Reads. And go hit subscribe on his channel. He's literally got thousands of spooky stories there. Yes, we love the Swamp Dweller around here. All right, it is time once again where we put the fedora on and bring in Jon Hudson for the unbiased UFO report. Yes, we love our Jon Hudson and the UFO report around here. He's got his hair slicked back, a la Bret Hart from the Hart Foundation back in the Attitude Era of wrestling. Jon, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Dave. How about you, man?
I got to admit, I'm getting a little excited. Getting a little excited for Vegas and the fan party. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to make it, which really bugs me. But, you know, I wish you could be there, buddy.
Yeah, I'm actually, kind of fighting depression over it, and actually, I have a buddy that really wants to go, and so I might try to talk him into driving there with me because I can't afford to fly right now. So it's for us, it's only 8 hours, and so 4 hours easy enough. And I mean, you grow up around here, you'd go to Vegas, for the night, like if you were young and dumb enough, and so there's still a very small chance I might be able to make it for one day, but we'll see. But
well, we hope you can, bud, because it wouldn't be the same there without you.
It would be fun. You know what, you guys are going to have a blast, and the best thing is it's going to be. And I got to be honest, like the reason why I want to go so badly, and the reason why I think anyone that can go should, is because I've been involved in many things that have gone on for years and years that started small. And those first meetings that you have, those first get-togethers, are usually much smaller, and they're much more familiar, and they're much more friendly, and they're much more kickback, and they're much more normal. And you build relationships, you meet people, you hear stories that you're never going to hear any other time. And that, as much as I'm glad you guys are going to continue doing it, and the rest of them will be amazing in their own ways, this is going to be a special event. And so people who can go should definitely be there.
Oh, that's beautifully said. Beautifully said. John, we bring you in here as our resident UFO guru about what's going on in the world. What do you got for us to kick off the week here?
To be honest with you, well, okay. From one aspect, this is really cool, but I'm a little frustrated with some of the stories I've been working on. So that's the reason why my frustration. But the thing is that what we have is we have two possibly similar examples of our problem with data collection, data analysis, and data dissemination. As it applies to both the UFO field and the cryptid field. And
cool.
What we have is we have a report that, and I'm afraid it's in German, and I wasn't able to get my translation working in time, so that was one of the things I was fighting with. So I only know the highlights of the article. But the thing is that, and it was posted by our friend whose name I always forget how to pronounce, Baptista Frisk. Oh,
Baptiste.
Baptiste, thank you. Anyway, he deserves credit for posting it. And the thing is that this it's a hell of an image of a disc, and I guess what I find very interesting, and I encourage everyone to read it, but what I find very interesting is that this was a case where multiple people from Twitter kind of jumped in to add a tremendous amount of color to this story. In that, essentially, one person jumps in and says, a friend of the show, Gilliam, probably mispronouncing his name too. But the point is that he said that Elizondo was asked about this photograph, and he basically said that that ATIP didn't work on it, and that essentially it was unavailable, either civilian Air Force or older than the ATIP program. So, does that tell us anything in particular? No, but it's very, very interesting, useful information that, should have been included in the article, but you couldn't get from the article. You're only going to get from wandering around the scary, channels of UFO Twitter. And essentially, but the thing is that then this other gentleman who goes by Jack Frostman claims that the source of the video had been found. And the uploader claims that it was taken from a flight from Rome to Paris in 2006 on a Panama Blue flight. The problem is that his channel also hosts other CGI videos, putting all of his videos in doubt. And then the second channel is that because of the limited information he gave, no one's been able to confirm the flight that he said he was on. And so, to me, it's a really interesting case because there's not enough to say anything at all, and but there's enough that there's a fair number of jumping off points in this story where a reasonable person could start coming to conclusions because of the emotional pull to do so. And essentially, you know, I mean, in my personal opinion, if this story about the gentleman who posted the video is accurate, you know, as was alleged in here, if that is accurate, then I would lower the probability of this photograph being real, but I wouldn't wipe it out completely by any means whatsoever. These things are always far more complicated than that. But I was curious, have you seen this photograph? Do you know anything about it?
I have not seen the photograph yet, but like you, I very much, you know, get my hackles up a little bit when I hear a photograph like this is on a site that is well known for CGI type videos. I mean, the unfortunate part that our public doesn't know who's listening to us is that it's very hard at times to decipher proper information, John, because we don't know what is real and what's not anymore. CGI has become so clean on film that, you know, I mean, look, if it was 5-10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's easy to tell. It's completely easy to tell. But you fast forward to the way technology has improved, it's very hard to trust any photograph or any video these days on whether or not it's real, unless the source is completely clean. And even then, when you get, say, American fighter pilots who are videotaping these things and have a good solid record for what they do, they're even being questioned about whether or not their videos are real. We're in a bad time when it comes to video, John.
Okay. Yes. Can I just point out as a side note, as a technical person, we
Please.
all warned you repeatedly. It's like, give me a freaking break. But anyway, this was supposed to happen. This was actually supposed to happen. This actually shows that we're making progress, right? This shows that we're actually doing the right things, right? Because the whole point is to be able to eventually build everything ourselves, right? So, but the thing is that this whole hang up people have on what's real, right? And this whole, I mean, do you realize that? Okay, yes, everything you said is true. There's no way that you can take any video that you find today and make any sort of any conclusions based on that, right? However, is that really that different? I mean, haven't we always said we need the camera, right? That unless we get the camera, we can't actually prove. You know, I mean, there's always been all these back cover conditions to what is, but now, aside from all that complexity that doesn't just exist in our world, it exists in many other worlds as well. Now we have this new problem where I know good people that you know, Dave, that are good people that are, from my brief analysis, sane individuals who are posting pictures of things and they don't know if it's real.
That's tough.
So man. What? How does this weight of real matter, right? I mean, what? I mean, you almost just have to ask: is it presently here? Right? Is it not? I don't care. I mean, is it presently here? I'm concerned. If it's not, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I mean, it really, at some level, we have to start being realistic about what is this hang up we have on what is real and what are real photographs. And that, yes, a single photograph, a single film by itself, it should not be, and it never should have been. It should always include, probably, I mean, I don't know what the good logic is on this for like other fields, but I would guess 6 to 12 different points out of like probably 48 or 64 points available that you would have to have set up so that you would actually get anything close to what is real. I mean, to me, yeah, I don't. But the thing is that we have to get to a point where essentially people start realizing that yes, video is useful, pictures are useful, but it needs to come with a plethora of
Nice.
other data sets, and what those data sets are, while they are weighted based on their quality and their source, they're not necessarily weighted based on their media type, right? Just like your body does. You take in smell and peripheral vision and sound and all sorts of other things when you're weighing what you see, right? Same idea, right? So, that is essentially how it's always been, how it should have been. No one should just trust any video that they see. But we also have to realize that even once you can film, here's the problem. You can film something with witnesses, have the film, have the camera, have all the chain of authority, have all the witnesses, have multiple angles, and you still don't know if what was filmed was actually real.
How does this...
Honestly, Dave, I can't even prove that you're Dave.
Oh, God, I hope so. I hope you can.
You'd be surprised. It's a lot harder than you think it is.
Okay, but how does this negatively impact what we're trying to learn here in the UFO community?
Oh boy, you know what? Okay, I hope this doesn't sound terse, but essentially, it's time to grow up. This isn't Boolean. There's no silver bullets. There's no white horse. There's nothing like that. I mean, everything is going to be a preponderance of a weight of evidence. That's how everything works, right? Everything is always going to be and for everyone it's different. Everyone's got some different magic thing in their head of what combination of facts need to be, set with some sort of, 80% or 90% reliability rule for them to say with confidence, yes, this is it. Some people have other weird hangups. Like for me, I really almost have to see it or feel it myself to really speak with with a lot of confidence. And that's not really always fair. But the thing is it these hangups, we need to recognize that it's part of the growing up is just weighting all these values and weighting all these data points and not needing this instant Boolean, yes, it's real, no, it's not. Because, for example, what if, for example, Bigfoot is real, but it's not a flesh and blood creature? It's some sort of an energy entity. Is it real then? For a lot of people, they would say no. It's not real because it's not flesh and blood. So we have to really start asking ourselves how much these definitions mean to us.
Wow. I've never really looked at it in that regard. And this is why you're the best when it comes up to this. Jon Hudson, the fedora-wearing guru when it comes to UFO research around the world with the Unbiased UFO Report. Jon comes in a couple times a week to discuss everything about UAP and the stories that are going on right now regarding this amazing, amazing subject. When we return, the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson rejoins us, and we'll be back for the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio right after this. Stay tuned. That is actually quite profound.
If you ever have to work in identity, it's something that you nearly have nightmares about. Because the thing is that I can't even prove I'm me. All I can actually do is provide a preponderance to say, hey, I can say with reasonable certainty. I can say with 94% probability, right? That's all I can really do. It's kind of nutty.
That is real. I mean, you talk about woo, Jon. That is big time woo right there.
Well, let's add to the fact that your DNA changes over time, right? You do actually incorporate the DNA of some things that you come in contact with, including mates, right? So, I mean, it's And now there's this whole new world of epigenetic. I mean, oh man, we're doing well, but we're treading in the shallow end.
Look at all I'm just looking at all the different sizes here. Okay, I don't like that one. That one I kind of like.
Oh, thank you very much.
Stunning Cindy with a great super chat there.
Yeah, very kind.
Look at the hair streaks in there. Those streaks look nice.
Clearly an alien.
Definitely an alien.
Has streaks like that.
Yeah, total alien. Also, a big thank you to Ozzy Simon, Horror Realm, Stephen, Terry, Vaughn, and Dragon L for the super chats tonight. Very much appreciate your support of SOR. I love all the Vegas chat in the chat room right now. I do. By the way, next year, it'll be, I can give you the date. I can already give you the date. Hold on. The date next year will be the 12th, 13th, 14th of May. 12th, 13th, 14th of May. And next year, it will be pretty cool because there's a couple things that are going to go on. We'll be celebrating Davey's 50th birthday. Hard to believe I will be 50 next year. My God. And we'll also be coming up with something really cool for you guys. So for those of you who are coming this year, wonderful. Thank you. I can't wait to meet each and every one of you. And yes, we're going to take a lot of photos, guys. We're going to take a lot of photos. But for those who can't make it this year, next year, we are going to do it all again. May 12th, 13th, 14th. It gives you 13 months to prepare. And we're going to make sure that there's hotel deals with promo codes. We're going to make sure that there's something real special for you guys there. And we're going to invite the same people around. Well, not the same, a lot of the same people. And, oh, Joe Kistner, thank you so much for that super chat, man. Very much appreciate that.
Super kind.
Not a problem. We love keeping the archives open and for free for people such as you, Joe, who can't make it to the live show. Just one of those things we do.
You know, one thing, Dave, I think we're going to be able to do at one point is because of the fact that you re-release all these little news segments I do with this date stamp and so forth, eventually what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to take all of those and slurp them into an algorithm. And it will actually create a system where essentially it will become a time-stamped, oh God, I would be killed by several people I know dearly for saying what I'm about to say. It would be like a blockchain. It would be, oh man, I can't believe I did that. But it would. I mean, it would be an incredible collection of data. It would be something else.
Mm-hmm. I'm John. You know what? You got me excited, man. I hope you can make it.
Yeah, we'll see. I got to talk to my buddy. We'll find out. Bit of a drive, but might be worth it.
Mm-hmm. I want to touch the fedora again. Yes, Jules, you were right. May 12, 13, 14, 2023. That is going to be next year's SOR fan party. At the, most likely, it'll be at the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas again. And it's just, I think it's a good place. And yeah. Hold on, guys. Here we go with the final half hour. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. Say thank you to each and every one of you for tuning us on in.
Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Our archives will always be free for you. Always. We don't believe in that charging for archive stuff around here. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight with the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson and the Unbiased UFO Report, where we get into all the latest and most awesome UFO stories that roll on in towards us. Jon, welcome back.
Thank you. Dave, I just realized I never sent you my notes. I apologize. So what I did, I just sent you a quick image of the story I want to talk about next, which has an image on it that I assume we can share if we include who posted it. But the thing is that, to me, so what this pertains to, and then actually I want to dovetail back into this whole identity thing. So I think there's a couple of important things we could talk about. But many of you have heard of the Beast of Bray Road. This is depending on where you are in the world, this is a story that you've heard growing up or so forth. And what's really interesting is that we now have a situation where there appears to have been pictures captured. And there is tremendous debate about the authenticity and so forth of these pictures. But looking at these pictures, you can see that this creature's, at least one of its front legs is pretty much non-existent, forcing it to walk on. And so essentially it looks like it might be a severely wounded wolf that's walking on two legs. And like I said, this was a new story for me. I have not had a chance to research it very well at all. But what I find super interesting about this is that, one, we have what could be a plausible explanation. I don't know if it covers all the details of that story, but it is a plausible explanation. The challenge is that even if a decent number of reasonable people come to the determination that this explains the story, it doesn't actually change anything. The story won't actually die. And I'm not saying it should, but what I'm saying is that this illustrates a real problem that we have in all these fields, in that because of our lack of ability to come to even a rough consensus, we are stuck in this forever loop of reevaluating and repressing data, which is exactly what happened with the previous story we talked about the disc. In that, I saw several people commenting with things like, "Oh man, we debugged that thing years ago. Why are you bringing that thing up again?" Right? And that's the sort of back and forth that you get. And this is to me, this is just super interesting because I am familiar with the story, and that's just to me a just very interesting explanation, at least for some of it. But I really do think it illustrates a real problem that we have, in that it's a lot of work to write out a proposed hypothesis of sorts, right? And and when you produce something, I can only give a personal example, but it's not a very good example, but it's one I know because it's mine. There was a while ago, I came to this what I believe was a reasonable conclusion, that essentially this report that had come out on a certain type of craft, as well as a report that had come out about some stuff that Danny Sheehan had said, as well as another report that come out, as well as this poster that was on Mick West's wall, were actually all the same craft. And I believe that I could now explain why it is that the poster was removed, and he was not told who took it or why. And that's because of the classification level that it was at, which was far beyond what he had. And so, to me, this actually explains a bunch of things, including one very famous UFO case, right? And essentially, the thing is that, one, I don't know. I didn't take any poll. I don't know how many people evaluated my data and decided that I was right or not. But I don't have anywhere I can take that to. There's no like board that I can go to. And the thing is that even if what I wrote was fantastic, how many people are going to read it? How many people are going to decide not to believe it just because they don't want to? And so then you start asking, what is the value in producing this data that really honestly takes a lot of work if it turns out that it's not going to actually move the ball at all, and to me it's these are two both really good, interesting stories. I mean, fun stuff to research, a cool way to spend your afternoon if you have it, right? But it does unfortunately draw, attention to an unfortunate problem we have, which, is somewhat culturally related to what we have, but it's also very much related to the identity problem that you and I were talking about before.
John, does this not take us back to the days of anecdotal evidence having to provide more detail and becoming more credible than where we've kind of put it? Now, I know it doesn't help the scientific field with anything, but at least it keeps the story going if we can't trust photographs or videos any longer.
So for me, there are no silver bullets, and there's nothing that's really worth a whole lot more than anything else, right? I mean, look, even in the case of freaking samples and DNA, right? I mean, you guys have that in the cryptid world, and still, it doesn't matter. So how you weigh these data points, but the point is that it's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be just your anecdotal story. It's not going to be just your hard data points. It's going to need to be some combination of them that provides a overall enough of a weight of evidence to suggest that you should bother moving forward with the story, right? That it's worth still investigating, right? Is essentially the weight, is essentially the challenge that you're using to decide to move forward. You don't have to decide, is this true or do I still believe it? The question is there still data to follow, right? Are there still paths to follow? And the thing is that, any, even me, like, look, even all of us, when we go on trips, right? We tell a story, and what do? We bring back things to prove we were there.
Mm-hmm. But John,
right?
Yeah, but John, let me ask you this then. If we can't trust anecdotal evidence, if we can't trust video, can't trust the word of people who are allegedly in the know, can't trust photographs, how do we accomplish anything in regards to solving these mysteries?
It's actually pretty easy. No one's going to like it, but it's easy. You require personal experience. And what that does is that creates then a requirement for a certain amount of localization and a certain amount of participation and somewhat of a interview process, I assume. And essentially, if you think about it, part of the problem is we're all trying to learn long distance. And maybe, just maybe, and I think there's data growing to support this. This is something where, yes, you can get into the mechanics of how the movie was made, but the movie itself, the script, how it was written, how it was acted, what scenes were drawn attention to, that was all incredibly personally specific to you. And so a lot of it only you're going to get. Which then makes it even harder to look at it as science.
Okay, but wouldn't that be the exact same thing as we're talking about with these people who claim to be getting downloads of information?
Well, yes, but the thing is that that's another perfect example in that essentially, the data points that we have in that case is we have a person that reports a believed experience and educational background, who then has some sort of an experience, and then after that experience gains knowledge that they don't think they should have or that they had before. Okay. Now let me preference that I've had this personally happen to myself. Okay.
Okay.
I never, ever, ever, ever thought aliens. Ever. ever. And so the thing is that, so my point is that we can describe the feeling, we can describe the result, we can describe ways to test it in the field, but for us to ascribe meaning and belief as to where it's coming from is very challenging, because in my case, all of my data supports that all of mine was coming from my subconscious. And that's what I've always believed. Am I right? I have no idea. And so I don't really like to say that because I really don't know. But that's what I've accepted. That's what I thought when I was a kid, when it was happening all the time. I mean, not that it doesn't happen now, but I mean, when it was weird, you know.
Well, you are a weirdo.
Happily so. But you know, the one other point I want to make, because I know we're running out of time here, is that you had a guest on the other night whose name is escaping me, but he brought up something that is really pertinent to our conversation. And what he talked about was, he talked about the fact that he believes that there are objects that appear in his space, so in his direct space, that only he can see. That the object can be there and other people can't see the object. Furthermore, they can't necessarily interact with the object. And while most people would initially just blow this off as a hallucination, in his case, he has some other data. This is why this other data matters, right? His other data is pupil dilation and other eye restrictions that seem to indicate that he's focusing on something. Now, the problem is that necessarily doesn't even seal the deal, because we all do micro muscle movements when we watch other people do things. So how do we know that the eyes don't do the same thing, that when we're hallucinating, your eyes don't create some sympathetic routine to match the hallucination? I'm just saying it's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I'm just offering it as a possibility. And so the thing is that, so for us to ascribe any conclusions to where it's coming from, it's so early. It's so freaking early. We really just need to be collecting the data and sharing our experiences. But the thing is, with this guy who saw this thing, now we have a whole new problem, right? Because if he is, now, if I'm wrong, if what I just said is wrong, and this other data set of the eye movement and so forth is valid enough to say that he is seeing something, and it could be, I don't know exactly how the mechanics of the eye works, as far as like can you trick it into thinking it got a photon? And can you pass it a photon and then ask it not to pay attention? I don't know if you can do that or not. But the thing is that something really weird's going on. And if it turns out that what he's saying is true, now everything's out. Everything's out.
But there are a lot of situations.
There could be a cat sitting on the table in front of me.
Yeah, and there are a lot of situations out there where people have been in groups, and this has happened to me, where we have been walking around, and like when the Bigfoot roared at us, 4 of us, right previous to that, 20, 30 seconds previous to that, I witnessed pixelation by a tree. One other person out of the other 3 saw that same pixelation that I did. The other 2 did not. They were the ones who wanted to continue the walk. And when we continued the walk 20, 30 seconds later from that area on my friend's property, we got roared at by this thing.
And I can't even fathom. Like I can't even fathom.
You cannot, and I have heard it once and once only, and I can tell you, once was enough.
I bet.
Okay.
I can't imagine. Your body, parts of your body reacted in ways that you didn't have any control over.
All 4 of us ran into the house. Thank goodness we were at the front of the house. All 4 of us ran into the house. You know, I could take some whooping or some hooting or something like that in the forest, but that roar, man, I will never forget. But the interesting part, just going by what you have said here as well, is why did only 2 of us see it? How can you have say a group of 10 people out on a camping trip? And this is a hypothetical story, but say 10 people out on a camping trip, a UFO flies over and only 5 of them see it, or 3 of them see it. And they're all pointing to the sky where it is, and nobody else can see it except them.
And the argument would be in the past, well, if the object can act on its environment, then it's real. Because if you have a cloaked device, the invisible device that then fires weapons on below, it will cause damage to that site. So then the single measurement is, can it have if it can be seen, it's having an effect on its environment. So therefore it is kind of real-ish.
Mm-hmm. Ish.
And reality, start recognizing the fact that at the very fundamental nature of reality is probability.
Very true.
That's not a mistake.
And that's where we're going to end tonight. The fedora-wearing Jon Hudson. Thank you for another great unbiased UFO report. Stellar as usual. And we'll talk to you in a couple minutes' time. Let's get over to Shirky Poo's news. All right, let's get right to it. See what Shirky Poo has for us tonight. Yeah, this was a big no-no by the government of Quebec. Ministry of Health and Social Services made an epic mistake this week when a link intended to point to the latest COVID-19 figures in La Belle Province instead took confused clickers to a popular porno site. The link directed people to a Pornhub foot fetish video entitled Femdom Foot Worship. The faux pas wasn't recognized for at least 30 minutes last Thursday. The department, which is also known as Santé Québec, deleted the tweet and apologized to its more than 100,000 followers for the mistake. Due to a situation beyond our control, a link with inappropriate content was posted to our Twitter account. We are looking for the causes. We are sorry for the inconvenience, read the apology, and that is that. A reenactment of a crucifixion of Jesus Christ over Easter weekend ended with the death of a Nigerian student who was taking part. Oh, yeah. Wasn't a good Friday for him. Sule Ambrose, a seminary student who had been studying for the priesthood, was taking part in the Good Friday reenactment of Christ's suffering and death. At some point during the proceedings, he slipped on the ground and collapsed, but onlookers assumed it was all part of the drama. Oh no, Ambrose was training to be a priest at Claretian University Seminary in Nadeke, a town in southeastern Nigeria. He was playing the role of Simon Peter in the Holy Day event and wore a long white robe for his part in the reenactment. Simon Peter was Jesus' most important disciple, the leader of the 12 apostles. When Ambrose could not get up at the end of the performance, people in the audience finally realized there was a serious medical issue. He was rushed to hospital where his condition worsened and eventually pronounced dead. The cause of the young man's death still remains unknown. Moving on. An unidentified California man was crushed to death at a car wash. How does this even happen? Well, let's find out. Police in Escondido were called to the car wash on the city's east side, where they found a 56-year-old man trapped between his car, a 2014 Scion XB, and the car wash machinery. It is believed he drove the car into the car wash, then got out of his car, whereupon it rolled forward, pinning him against the machines. No one knows why the man left his car, but the car wash was not running when the accident happened. The freak accident triggered an alarm at the car wash, and police say may have sounded for about half an hour before anyone found the deceased man. First responders were able to lift the car off the man and begin CPR. He was rushed to hospital where he was pronounced dead. The Pearl self-service car wash in question is on East Valley Parkway. There are 2 Pearl car wash outlets in Escondido, part of a chain of 6 in San Diego and Southern California. And finally tonight, here's a weird one. A pair of diversity advocates have been left red-faced after falsely accusing a school district in Arizona of being racist for hiring a DJ to perform in blackface. It turns out the man hired for the job was indeed black. Arizona State University professor Stuart Roden and librarian Jill Lawson, who focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Arizona State, thought they were calling out the Scottsdale Unified School District's Hopi Elementary PTA for its decision to hire Kim Coco Hunter, a local black DJ, for their charity event. The DJ that the Hopi PTA hired was in fact a black man. Hopi PTA President Megan Livingood wrote in response to Lassen in a message obtained by the media, "It is insulting that you feel myself or the PTA condone racist behavior or encourage it by posting it on social media. Yeah, this is a brawl that isn't going to end soon." Lassen reportedly replied, "You're right. We should have reached out and inquired before making accusations on social media." The death of social media. It needs to happen. Thank you to everybody for listening on in. Thank you to Shirky Poo for the news. A great unbiased UFO report from the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson. Swamp Dweller for some spooky stories. And Graeme Rendle for his knowledge of historic UFOs. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAP, Facebook, Spreaker, and on Twitter.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
We're watching.
we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home.
I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night, but soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night. Fantastic show. Fantastic show. There's the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson right there. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, there we go. Oh, no, Hunter, grab the mic. There we go. Had to move it for the puppy dog.
Right on. How's your puppy?
Oh, puppy's doing. Let's see. You want to say hi, Maui? Come here. Come here. Oh, say hi. Oh, he's asleep. He does that a lot. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I choked you.
He's like, what are you doing, man?
He actually, I actually took him into the grocery store with me the other day. He actually did really well. I was impressed. Not easy walking out.
Where did you take him?
I took him to the grocery store.
Oh, cool.
My local I have a local Nob Hill just like just like a block away from me, and they, because it's built into an like a big luxury apartment complex.
Right.
They let in animals, and so because people are often walking their animals when they want to go get groceries. So as long as your pet's well behaved, you can bring them in. So Maui came in, and it was hard for him. Like when I went up to the apple table to get apples, I didn't warn him that there were that many different kinds of apples. I think he was a bit overwhelmed. He definitely struggled a bit there, but he did good. He didn't grab anything, which was impressive. More than you can say most humans first time they go into a strip club,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So Maui likes apples.
Oh, he we have a apple tree. It's not, they aren't like the good apples that you eat. They're like good for like baking.
Yeah.
He doesn't know any better. And he not only eats them, but I will find him on his hind legs, just like the beast of, Briar, whatever it is, road, right? Him up on his hind legs, completely in the air, with his teeth grabbed onto an apple from the tree, trying to pull it off the tree, completely in the air, trying to pull it off, and he always wins because, he's the dog and gets the apple. And he eats so many of them that during apple season, he puts on weight.
Good for him.
I actually have to like feed him less dog food to compensate. It's freaking hilarious.
You know what's funny is I went to Walmart on Saturday and picked up a couple of dog bones for my dogs as treats. And it's funny because my German Shepherd, he always, every time you give him a treat, he always gives you this look like, I don't deserve this. I really don't deserve this. I know you say I'm a good boy, but I'm not really sure about that. I'm not sure. Are you sure I should take this? Like he just acts all sheepishly, and then he takes it completely gently out of your hand, and then he looks around, and then he's like, okay, and then it's straight to his bed to go chomp down on it, right? But it's just the funniest thing. And then last night we had steak dinner, and I barbecued up some steak, and I was like, okay, well, I gave a couple of the fatty pieces to the dogs. My one dog, Doug, he just doesn't care. He's like all over that, like anything. And Shadow, the German Shepherd, was kind of like, oh, here we go. And he just wolfed it on down, right? There was no tomorrow. It was so hilarious because usually he's just so like, I can't believe you're giving me a treat. Like, what did I do to deserve this?
Well, that's the thing is that there's so much, that scenario is such a good example of where the inner nature of animals will come out. And when I met my wife, she had this amazing dog named Shaggy, and her brother had Shaggy's older brother, Slapshot. And when they were puppies, Slapshot got into the steak, and but instead of eating it himself, they caught him up on the counter, throwing it down to the ground for Shaggy to eat.
Yeah, it's Doug.
He was tossing it all to the puppy, and it's like, wow, man, that's a good-natured dog. I was impressed.
It's my Doug Stevenson. If there is a morsel on that countertop, every night, man, I could hear him jumping up onto the counter.
Yeah, but does he help anyone else by sharing?
Oh no, he's selfish.
Well, see, that was the important part, not the jumping up on the counter.
Yeah, no, Doug is completely selfish.
Yeah, one of the big questions I have is, like, how many last hops are there toward humanhood? Like, can you just come from any like similarly sized, similarly complex creature, or like, is there like a very regimented pattern that you have to follow? Like, like in college, you got to take these classes. Super curious.
I have no idea, dude.
Because there is well, I mean, there's actually really good anecdotal evidence that things like dogs, do come over. Do reincarnate as humans. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, I don't think everyone has to become a dog first and then they become a human. I have to imagine that, if you're a really good dolphin for a while, you can probably, I don't know. I mean, like, I just would like to think that there's more than one path,
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I honestly think that that's why. Because you ever meet those people where they just like, they seem like a badger, like you just can't really put your finger on it, but it's just, they're just badger like. It's just everything about, like, there's badger like, or like my brother, Bear. The dude's a bear. He's always been a bear. He walks like a bear. There's so many bear like, it's ridiculous, right? Well, I think there's a really good chance that that's because the last, it basically indicates this might be their first time as humans, and maybe they haven't fully let go of all that animal, instinct yet, because they were probably an animal for a couple hundred lives, because it takes a while to get good at it, right? So and then the question becomes, can you get demoted? I mean, can you be such a bad human that you have to go back to being a badger again?
All I know is your brain is weird. Your brain is weird. Oh God, that's just hilarious.
With all, yeah, no. I take that as a significant compliment. I really do. I think weird is good, but come on. I mean, you gotta consider this stuff. I mean, it's
Is that why some people look like animals?
Yeah. Well, that's my opinion. I think it's because they essentially they were they were that animal last time, and they were really good at it, and they're kind of struggling at being a human, and so they kind of go back to some of their old known habits because it's comfortable. Thank you, Joe.
I hope so, Jesse. By the way, look at Jesse's beard and mustache combination. That's nice salt and pepper in there. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very pleasing. I remember when mine was like that. Now it's just a big bag of salt underneath my lips.
If you read Monroe's books, there's a part where he believes that he goes back to like the original form of our consciousness, like the very original form. And it's a really pretty story. It's this beautiful symphony of like dancing lights in like the depth of space that start off basically not being able to see, but you can feel warmth, and so you gravitate toward the warmth, and the warmth kind of collects these clusters of light that kind of, and like all you experience is basically the feeling of flying, the feeling of tumbling, the feeling of acceleration, the feeling of chasing each other, the feeling of all that stuff. And then you might develop some concept of friendship or teams at a very basic level. But the idea that there might be some kind of a continuous story arc from that all the way to this, is that, to me, is just beautiful. I mean, it's especially if you believe it there's multiple paths, right? Which just makes it even better. I mean, honestly, I think that there should be some reasonable minimum animal that would come up. I don't think you should be able to just, be a good rat and then, but you meet people and you wonder.
How much pot have you smoked tonight?
No, none tonight. No. I had my daughter with me earlier.
Oh,
This is my brain works. Yeah.
what is under that fedora? That's what we need to learn.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, man, I've been a professional futurist. I'm always having to like look into the crazy and look into the weird and look into the wacky. That's basically been my whole life. The thing is, my whole life, it's always been, basically, if you're in a room and someone comes in and says, "We have this thing we have to solve," and it's something that like no one knows how it works and no one knows what it is, I'm the one that ends up with it. And not because they make me, because I want it. I like it. I like the unknown. I like figuring stuff out. And so that's just always been my life. And so it pulls me in all sorts of weird directions.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes just the learning process of the direction is valuable, even if you don't take that path.
I'll be right back, buddy.
Like once I was asked if the team I was on, if we could move a nuclear reactor. And to our credit, we didn't just instantly say no. We asked for time to look into it. And then we said no. But it was interesting looking into it, like what was involved. But that was fun because we bought this company that had this reactor, and you go in there and they had these lights up, these colored lights, and different lights meant different things. And I was asking her about it. I was like, what does this light mean and this light mean? And she's like, yeah, well, this light, realistically, if this light goes, don't run, because it's all over. And honestly, if you run too fast, your skin may fall off. So, walk slowly. Well, basically, to move a reactor, you have to defuel it, and it's. I have a hard time believing that moving them is cost effective, because so much of the cost goes into the cooling systems, and those cooling systems can be very custom, localized, and so forth, depending on if they have like a local, resource of a dam or something. And honestly, nuclear, like that technology has gotten so good over the last couple of years that realistically, it's almost like having a PC. Like you wouldn't want to keep the same PC for 10 years either, right? Oh, thank you, sir. But yeah, but in nuclear reactors, I mean, it's well, like for example, we've been able to design very small, very safe nuclear reactors for a very, very long time. They're just, insanely expensive. So if we could take like nuclear submarine grade reactors and take those and shrink those down to, something, say, the size of a trash can or even like a car. Boy, man, you could run some stuff. You could run some stuff. And there's actually a project right now. I think there's DARPA. There's a request out, and I know they were looking at nuclear, and they were even looking at fusion possibilities, but they want to be able to get to a point where they can airdrop like a canister into a location and have it land and have it set itself up and be like a local reactor to supply power for like what will then become a very large installation around it over time, so that they basically can start. Because the thing is that the only, like, I mean, other than the proximity to where you want to be, the only things that really limit you are proximity to water and to power. So if if I can get dropped into a place where I know where the water is coming from, and I can drop a reactor in for the power, I can hold out for a long time. Long time.
What do you say there, Fedora?
Hey, Dave, what's the public? I have no idea about this. What is the public feeling about nuclear power in Canada? Are you guys anti-nuclear power, pro, neutral?
Neutral.
Neutral?
Yeah.
Do you have some?
All of Canada's nuclear power facilities are out east. We don't have any out west here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people hoped it would stay that way in the U.S. too, but California is just too much land. No, it's amazing technology for sure. Absolutely astounding technology. Yeah, so it's really funny. When I was what's in my shirt? It says science is not a liberal conspiracy. I love this shirt. I wear it to family events, and because it'll usually upset one or two people and get me to enjoy a good conversation.
That's awesome.
Well, because the thing is that they don't leave upset, right? Because I have no interest in upsetting them, right? So I can usually actually steer the conversation someplace very normal and relaxing and just fun. So it ends up usually being a nice conversation anyway. So, but it's their reaction to it. Say?
I just said hey to David Lopez.
It just ends up being a hook and sink sort of thing. Yeah, it was really funny. A while ago, I was talking to this startup. I might still join, and one of the things that we have to figure out is how we do identity login. And boy, man, is that a freaking nightmare. Because I mean, the thing is that realistically, like, how do I know you're Dave?
How do you know you're me?
How do I know? Better question. How do you know you're Dave? When you wake up in the morning, you ever had a dream you were somebody else?
No.
Ever?
No.
You should try it. It's really educational. A little odd, but it's very educational. So when you wake up from that, you feel different. You get a sense for this body being different, not bad or good different, just different eyes, different. It's different. It's hard to if you haven't experienced it. It's weird. I thought everyone dreamed about being someone else.
No.
I remember being very worried at one point. There was this one dream I woke up. It was so real, and there was a part of me that was a little worried that it was real, and that I just messed up some guy's life because I couldn't do it well. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was messing everything up. It was a disaster. I mean, essentially, I think I essentially got the poor guy fired and probably ruined his marriage.
What did you do?
well, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a disaster. I mean, first of all, I was young, so I had no business in some man's body, like trying to do a man's world. It was messy. But the thing was, is it sometimes this would happen where when I would wake up in the morning, it would take me a good, 20 minutes or so to kind of reconvince myself that, like, this is me, like, here, like, I'm me now, like this is the real sort of thing. I mean, in your head, it's not like a complete suspension of belief or disbelief. There's always that connection to reality where you kind of know you're playing a game to a degree, but there is a weird suspension of awareness. I forgot why you originally asked me that. What were we talking about? We were talking about Quantum Leap. Oh man, I love that show. Quantum Leap is awesome. There's actually some talk about bringing Quantum Leap back. Believe it or not.
I got a question for our audience.
Oh, but real quick, Dave. Just what the last thing I was going to ask you is it? I developed a sense for me being me. Do you ever have a sense that do you ever when you're looking through your eyes, do you ever have an awareness that you're looking through your eyes? Like, is there ever a sense that there's a familiarity with the way this body feels? Do you know what I mean? Any sense of that?
I used to get that long time ago, where it felt like I was looking through someone else's body, even though I knew it was in myself.
All right, there you go. So that's weird, right? Yeah. So here's the question: why do you even need that code?
What
like,
code?
Why does your brain even need to know how to allow you to feel that way? Like, where did that sensation come? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're talking about I don't know. To me, it's kind of like if you bought a car that you didn't know anything about, and you knew there was something weird about it, and you discovered that it had a parachute, and you're like, well, wait a second, why does this thing have a parachute? Doesn't that mean that it's more than the car? It's kind of like that sort of thing, where you're kind of looking for like a really extreme, data point that allows you to kind of follow it and find something, really kind of special and different. But to me, like this whole, to me, this whole sense of self, this whole comes into this whole identity thing, because essentially, unless you have, essentially what you would have to have is you'd need a Bitcoin ledger type thing. You'd need something like that, and you would need you almost need a continuous video thread with telemetry from birth. Essentially, unless someone's actually watched you come out of your mother, there's all sorts of times you could have been swapped. And so we all basically make a lot of just assumptions, because 99.9% of the time they're right. And 99.9% nothing happens. But it's happening a lot right now with DNA stuff, where people are doing DNA checks and finding out suddenly out of the blue their parents aren't their parents. Right? And they're 45 and they had no idea. That's happening more and more. It's weird. And so then you have to really ask yourself, like, who are you? And then how do you prove that? How do you go, like, you can go to a certain place, but my point is that if I had enough access to your stuff, I could convince someone else that I'm you. Because most people only need about three things of data. So if I could provide, like 2 pictures IDs where my face matched, there were like 2 different offices, maybe like some kind of a driver's license and some sort of a tax thing or a medical thing. You might need a witness, but those aren't hard to come by. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, what happens when someone else successfully convinces a group of people that they are you, and then you show up? It's funny because most of us, our experiences with it are usually wrapped in sci-fi television shows and funny sitcoms where this happens. But the truth of the matter is that in like on the internet, this is a problem. It's a real problem. It's one of the reasons why there's so much bad behavior out there, because we haven't figured out how to do this right. We haven't figured out how to do this properly yet. Essentially, there needs to be some way to make sure that everything that you do is recorded. But only what you do. Never ever what anyone else does. Never more than you did or less than you did. And you need to have access to it. And you need to be able to watch it and see what's on there. And it's going to take us a long time to get there.
It could. It could.
It's going to take us a really long time to get there.
It just might.
But it's kind of like, you ever seen that movie, The Prestige?
No.
It's with Hugh Jackman and another actor I really like. Anyway, it's all about these competing magicians. And one of them has basically got Tesla to build him this device that makes it look like it teleports him, but it turns out it doesn't actually teleport him. What it does is it clones him, and the box in front of him where his clone shows up, he always puts a loaded gun there. And so the instant the clone shows up, the clone picks up the gun and shoots the old one. And so what happens at the end of the movie is this whole time you think he's been pulling off this magic trick, and he goes into the basement and he finds like 30 or 40 or 50 bodies stacked up for each night he performed. Because he basically had to kill himself for each performance. But then you have to start asking yourself, okay, well, who's the original? Is he really him? Is he a copy? Thank you, Edward Norton. And it goes down to there's an old mind game from a long time ago. This whole idea of, if you take a ship, a sunken ship, and recover it, and you put it in a museum, and then over the course of 500 years, you end up replacing one by one every single part of that ship because it falls apart. But you do it one by one. You do it very carefully. You match everything, match every color, match every material, match everything so carefully. You do it one piece at a time. But at the end of that 500 years, there is absolutely nothing in that ship that was original. Is it the ship?
I don't know.
It used to be the ship. There's nothing else that's more like the ship. It's certainly related to the ship, but it's actually not the ship anymore. Unless you decide it is. And then it is. And that's the thing. I mean, that, to me, that's what a lot of all of this is coming to, is that we've all been running around thinking that we had these belief systems and we had these beliefs and we had these things, and we thought we had them because we had to. We thought we had them because they were right. We thought we had to because our parents told us to or whatever. And then a lot of us go through this period of disillusionment where we realize we don't have to believe those things. And then there's kind of this part that comes in the other side where you start realizing that, yeah, you don't have to. But you want to believe in some of them because it makes life more fun. And that's all there is to it. You want to believe in some of them because it makes life more fun. And that's it. That's all it comes down to.
That is awesome.
What movie is this? Oh God, there's so many great movies on this. You ever see In the Mouth of Madness? There's this amazing movie called In the Mouth of Madness. It's an old movie where like this guy writes a movie and he goes to watch the movie, but then the movie isn't like it ends up like he comes out of the movie and like everything is as it was in the movie. And then there's it's like this weird reality things that happens. I believe it was a Stephen King book that it was based on. But it was nutty. I think it was called In the Mouth of Madness. That was a crazy movie. So many good movies on the suspension of reality and what is identity. It's such a problem on the internet. It really is. It's a freaking nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And the thing is, sometimes you don't want to lock it down that hard, right? Because like sometimes it's helpful for me to log into something as my daughter, even if she's still logged in as herself somewhere else. Now, technically, that shouldn't be allowed. But there actually are cases where it is useful. So, and you start doing this right, and then you can start doing a lot of like higher order checks and so forth. Like, for example, like I don't know when they started doing it a couple of years ago, but there was a time where you could have a credit card, you could live in California, you could have never ever traveled out of California, and someone in Paris can charge a bunch of money to your credit card. And that doesn't happen anymore because they can tell where you are and they can tell that you didn't buy any plane tickets and they can tell that you never arrived in Paris. So there's no reason for you to be there. So when they see that charge, they're going to put a hold on it and they're going to call you, right? Well, that's just another layer of logic on top, right? And so that's the kind of thing that you can start doing with identity if you start getting good at having unique identities, because then you can start saying things like, well, there's no way that Dave could be here right now because 5 minutes ago Dave was here and it takes longer than 5 minutes to get here. So obviously this is not Dave.
Very true. Very true.
And to me, this really dovetails like hardcore and not a pleasant way into this whole topic of the phenomena, because there's really decent evidence that some of what people are seeing are I don't even want to use the word synthetic. They are instantiated objects that are being somewhat projected in a way by an orb of some sort. Now, what if we find out, for example, that every single fairy, every single gnome, every single Bigfoot, every single shadow person, every single ghost, every single thing, all of them, every single one of them, what if all of them is just an orb pretending to be something else? But it still does pretend to be those things. And when it does pretend to be those things, it takes on their characteristics. It is a 12-foot thing when it is a 12-foot thing. It can pick up trees and do things with them. So it's not just a little orb anymore. But in that scenario, do Bigfoot really exist? Kind of. Ish. Or is it that there are a very small percentage of real ones and the rest of them are orbs putting on a show? Or could it be that there used to be real ones and now they're all orbs, but the reason why they do it is because they saw it a long time ago? Or could it be that most of them are flesh and blood and only a small percentage of them are projected from orbs? It gets very challenging.
Very challenging. John, we're going to call it the night right there because I do have to go to bed tonight. And I do have to get up with my boy in the morning and get him ready for school. So I will chat.
What grade's he in?
He's in grade 3.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. How early does he have to be up? What time does he have to be there?
I get him up and at about 7:05. And we're at the bus stop for about 7:50, 7:51. Bus comes at 7:55. And it's all good.
Is any of that good research about the fact that you shouldn't do that to kids getting up there yet?
Do what to kids?
Get them up that early?
No, because we're not. My kid usually is up at 5:30.
Oh, well, hey, you're lucky. That's far out. That's cool. Nice.
Lady,
wake you up.
Yeah, before we let
coffee.
you go, something for the ladies here. We have a couple of new designs on our store, as we're always adding new designs. So I want to quickly share this with you. We've put up a couple of tank tops and t-shirts of Spaced Out Radio Crescent Moon Fairy that you can get at our store right now. And let me just see if I can go like this to zoom on in here. That's what it looks like right there.
Ooh, I like that, Dave. That is nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. So if you're looking for something, we got those, and I got them in t-shirts as well. So if you want to check them on out, tank tops and t-shirts. And if you're a football fan, we also have, where is it here? Where did it go? It was supposed to be in here. Where'd it go? Hold on, now I have to find it because it's disappeared on me. Where'd it go?
Maybe it was never real.
No, I put it up there. Maybe I don't have it published. Hold on. Where's my store now? Let's go here. Maybe it's on page 6. Recently added. There it is. We put a football helmet. Got the SOR football helmet right there. And that's what it looks like on white. The SOR football helmet. If you want to check it on out. Nice and simple.
A football helmet?
If you're a hockey fan, we got the goalie mask. This one's kind of cool. So we'll go like this. I got to go in here and name all of these. Come on. There we go. So you can see the spaceships and the aliens with the Bigfoot and our logo up top. And yeah, what else do we have here before we let you go? What else did we put up here? We put on a long sleeve shirt. And of course, don't forget the gnomies. Don't forget, I'm one with the gnomes. There you go. Lots of cool stuff at our store, people. Do your shopping right there. John, we'll see you soon. Tomorrow night on the show, everyone, Who is with us? Anne Celine, her personal journey of the unknown, tomorrow night. You've seen her in our chat room a number of times. She is also the owner of one of the digital broadcasters that we broadcast on, KPNL Radio. And she'll be here to tell her story tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. Thank you to Dragonelle, Vaughn, Terry, Stephen, Horror Realm, Simon, Cindy, and Joe for the amazing super chats. We'll see you all tomorrow night, everyone. Good night.